Yeah, and we're pretty balanced, so I feel pretty good about that.
Sweet. We just trouble chat.
We trouble chat. Hey, we trouble chat. I think that's gonna be the
Um,
start of the stream. We trouble chat and we sound good. Okay, so I'm just gonna tell everybody who we are. We're Dexbuild. Should we give like full background? We're not like this isn't our first rodeo, but we're far removed from the game. 10 years ago, we were Splat Panda, which was like a channel that we tried, we twitched, we had fun. Then life got in the way. We got married and had kids. It's not like, you know, anyone directly told us not to, but stuff happened. So, and then finally we decided to come back. Let's start talking about games again and streaming again and playing games again, which we're excited to do. But we figured why not kick it off by starting with like a very like here's what I would call it. I want to know what you think about this. I think about this as like a Goaty episode by which we can measure future Goaty episodes in a way that I hope will feel like, oh my god, can you believe we played like 5 games last year? Like this year we played 15. They were all great. We know more about games. We're more involved. Not to say we won't have fun with this conversation, but like hopefully, if this thing goes well next year, it's like, oh, look how far we came. He'll be the measuring stick. You know what I mean?
yes. Um, Definitely a starting point is kind of how I'm looking at it. We've, like you said, we tried this a little bit before, and I would have been nervous about is it perfect, is it not? Like, obviously, we're troubleshooting on the fly here, knowing that this is our starting point.
Yeah,
It's the games obviously are part of it because, yeah, I've played like 5 games this year, maybe a few more, but also, they say the whole thing is just hit record, so we've done it now. It just gets easier.
exactly. We're doing it. It's actively we have hit record.
Yeah.
I think so it's also important for people to know, I guess, like you and I have been friends for Jesus, 15 years now. And um so like we keep in touch other ways, but I also feel like there's definitely a component of that to it, right? You know what I mean? Like it's a cool way to be like just to have something with friends as you get older. We don't live in the same area anymore. Uh so to have just something to continue to like bond over. I feel like that's one of the nice things about games. We've used it with our other friend who will often be a guest, I imagine, on these. Probably, I think maybe that could be another dream measuring bar next year. He joins us for the Goaty episode.
Yeah, another
But
main character.
exactly that like um that's kind of the cool part about what we've used games for is to like stay in touch even as we've all like moved around maps all the time, which is kind of cool. But uh anyway, so for our Goaty episode, what we're going to do, because again we haven't played as many games, we decided we're going to start by talking about what games we've played this year that weren't from 2024, and we'll talk about the games we wish we'd played, which I think is also an interesting measuring stick because it will show you like I've got like 10 games I wish I'd played, like a lot, not kind of like games I'm like, dang, I wish I'd gotten to that this year. And I've already actually like today crammed in one more to get it on this Goaty list, which by the way, I'll tell you when we get there, but it jumped way up. And I think that's fun to look at as well and then see like what that looks like next year. I imagine that list could shrink. And of course, at the end, we'll talk about what are our lists of our top 10, or in your case, top 4 games that you want to talk about in order. And then I think at the end, we'll just have a little bit of fun of saying like, okay, what is our channel top 5? Like as a conglomerate, like the first ever inaugural Dex build Goaty top 5. And we'll see where that gets us. So
We're gonna have to talk waiting at that point also for our Dexbuild official. There's no way that we can't weight your opinions a little bit heavier, at least a little bit.
oh, oh, a little bit, but like I'll be interested to see. I was telling you before we started, like I'm pretty excited to hear what you liked best because like you often play games. You're always like kind of a, as if the viewers won't pick up on this, like you're a pretty chill guy. Like you don't like just let opinions fly. I do all the time, and I'm interested to just like hear. Okay, like what are the workings in Andy's mind of all these games you played, including your non 2024 games? Like you've kind of told me a little of how you felt about games, but I am interested to see how they all stack up on your list. So without further ado, dude, let's pull up the non 2024 games and start talking about them. I do think it'll be a little weighted. I'll try to go a little faster on my back halves because obviously you played fewer games. So like I won't spend 10 minutes talking about each of my like 10 through 6 games. Otherwise, it'll be me talking for an hour.
Well,
Obviously, stop me.
some of
but
these, I'm sure I will have questions about them. So maybe we let that be the thing that keeps you going a little
Mhm.
bit longer on some versus others. And I think maybe if you want to do like 10-9, I'll do 5. You do 8-7, I do 4.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good idea.
Or vice
That's perfect.
versa. I'll do 5 and then you
How many?
10-9 so that you actually finish on your number one instead of me on mine.
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Tell me, remind me again. How many non 2024 did you have? 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Perfect. Yeah. Why don't you start then? Let's hear what your number 5 non 2024 game is. This is the first revealed game of our Go Toy, or excuse me, of our Goaty episode.
All right. For me, it is Baldur's Gate 3.
Number 5. Wow.
Yeah. I if I could go back, if this is the same deal whenever we play Divinity, obviously same kind of game. But if there is a game that I wish I could have given the amount of time that it required more than this, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Um, we started playing as a group with the third, which I don't know if we've named him or not. I'll not do
Oh,
that right
Brandon.
now. Okay, Brandon.
No,
So
we'll do it. It's Brandon.
we
Yeah.
we
Let's name his actual full name and his social security number if we could.
yeah, we had our playthrough with him, and I mean, like you said, we do our guys' night once a week. The games have been what has been constant since college, however many years ago. But it's like at this point 2 hours a night. So a game like Baldur's Night or Baldur's Gate over 2 hours a night. I mean, I think by the end of it, you were saying every stream we might be done in 2 years. So
Yeah.
I tried to play through on my own, and it was fine until we got to the point that I had caught up with us. And then I don't have time nor enough headspace to organize 2 concurrent playthroughs of Baldur's Gate. So
Yep.
it's, I know what it is. I know it's better than 5, but for my circumstances and my
Yeah.
roadblocks, I could only give it so much.
So this I think is fun. I think if there's suspense, I think I won't do this. But if you say something that does land on my list, I'm gonna tell you and have you put it where it goes. Okay. So I say that to say my Go Toy list. Um, no, you know what? It didn't make it because I played enough that didn't count. But Baldur's Gate would be on there if we'd finished it. I didn't really give it that because similarly to what you were saying, that's a game like I do love. Like so I have ranked. I've told you I've been using backlog to go back and do my Go Toys from or excuse me, my Game of the Year, Jesus, from other years. And I still actually put Baldur's Gate at number 3 for 2023, behind Zelda and Lies of P. So I know what the quality was because I remember playing alone. So I had 3 playthroughs. So you talk about concurrent playthroughs. I was playing
Yeah, I
alone,
forgot you and your
I
wife.
was playing with my wife, and I was playing with you guys. And the cool thing about that is you actually get really familiar with the story and you can experiment with all the different things that game can do. So in some ways it's cool, right? Because there's limitless ways the story can unfold. But to your point, then all of a sudden it became, wait, did I do that in our playthrough? Did we do that in this playthrough?
Yeah,
What's this build? Like I don't remember what I was building toward here. So there's a little bit of the juggling. But the other thing that was hard was um when you get ahead of one, then that means when you go play with your ones that are behind, I'll leave my solo one out because obviously you can treat that however you want. But then that leads to the rushing thing, right? In a game where you're meant to like experiment, if you know what you're supposed to do in a situation, the group suddenly can't like try things because then it became like, if Brandon got a little bit ahead, he'd be like, "Oh, to beat this, you got to do this, make the armor, punch this through, go here," and then we didn't get to explore that. Or like you
yeah.
get somewhere and you'd be like, "You got to do this with the bear. You can save its baby, do whatever." Or I'd get ahead and I'd be like, "Yeah, here's how you save Karlak. I want a banger." You know what I mean? Like whatever. Like so, you're all like you have these agendas that are all tugging at each other. People don't get to try different things. So I think that's the other like big limitation. So
I know
um,
also you just touched on a thing, and I don't want to spend too much time on our very first game, but specifically having the other playthroughs catch up to the first. It's not very often that I play a game where I might possibly be ahead of you all. So
right.
whenever we do, like there was a spell for this game where maybe for like a chapter or a portion, I was ahead of you all. So I was making sure to be in the front. And anything y'all ask a question, or even if you didn't ask a question,
Yep.
I was saying, that right there, get that. We're looking for this thing over here. Which, I mean, we ran through that period quickly, but that is hard because then I remember points where you had said, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. You go kill yourself with this thing that's going to explode. I won't say anything. And it just gets a little tricky.
Yeah, and that's been the balance of those games. And to your point, I don't want to hang too long on like what was probably a lot of people's game of the year last year, but like
Hmm.
that's why I struggle about those games. It's like they, in some ways, feel really good to play with a party. In some ways, to play like good to play with yourselves or yourself. But I feel like neither is perfect. So what happens like when you're alone, it's hard to juggle four people and you don't get the shared experience. When you're with someone, you have a little bit of the like everyone has different things they're trying to do. It's hard. I actually think the sweet spot, and you ended up doing this with Brandon when like when suddenly I didn't have as much time, you guys went back to Divinity and played two people. I kind
Yeah.
of wonder if that's the sweet spot. That's easier to juggle. I found it easier with Janet, although the same thing, I was too far ahead, but like where it was easier to have like you had a shared experience, but there wasn't as many tugging people running in different places. You're like, where are you? What are you doing? And all of a sudden you started a fight while somebody was trying to do something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
There's that. But
You're fighting
anyway,
spiders in a
makes sense at
different
5. Like you said,
galaxy.
it's not a commentary for you on the quality, but of your circumstance. So that's fair.
Yeah. Real quick, before
I
you
won't be
give
fine.
10 and
Yeah,
9,
go ahead.
you said something about me being, they might pick up real calm, whatever, versus you more out there. Right now on my
Yeah.
screen, and this is a note for future us, my screen directly in front of me does not have your face. Your face is up here and it's up here. So you probably see my eyes darting all over trying to figure out which version to look at you. I don't want to do this the whole time because that's awkward for the camera. And then also I don't want to just sit here and like do one of these. So I feel like I
Oh, your list is
look like
speaking
a
and hide it,
crazy
hide it,
person.
hide it. Yeah, get it out of here. No spoilers.
I'm sorry.
uh no, I got you. You know what you should do, dude? I just saw today in the hub we were just talking about. There's an AI that keeps your eyes at the camera. Have you seen that? So even if you're doing
No.
what you're doing right now, it would keep your eyes locked in on the camera.
That's weird. I was thinking I would get
Yeah,
like a sticky note and draw like a little bit of your face and put it right here so that I have a
do
thing
it.
that I'm looking at.
Yeah, do it. All right.
Anyways,
So
number 10.
I actually only did 5 to stay with yours. So we'll rejigger this. Like I'll do like, we'll figure it out. Well, I guess this will stand with me at number 1. But my number 5 game I played to get ready for a game that was coming out this year. So my number 5 game of the other years that I had played this year was Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. So I don't know if you remember this game. Senua apostrophe S. Sacrifice. So I don't know how much you know about or remember this game, but I want to say the original came out Hellblade 1 release date 2017. So 7, 8 years ago now. Uh Pretty like hyper realistic game set in sort of like Nordic culture, like has a very like Vikings feel. Um and the sequel is coming this year, so I was like, well, I want to play the original. It's pretty short. I want to say like 8 hours. So I crammed it in before the new one came out.
I
I have like a
remembered
lot of thoughts.
the art on this one. I've never seen any footage, but I remembered that album art, whatever you call that, for sure. I mean,
Cover
you
art,
had
yeah.
me at Vikings, so please do.
Yeah, I know. So it's actually the thing I don't know if you would love about it. So it deals with a lot of stuff, but like it's sort of actually meant to be like an exploration of mental illness, but through the lens of that era. So this is like a woman who's dealing with sort of like essentially schizophrenia, I believe it is. Like she hears voices all around her. The game tells you at the beginning, like you're meant to wear headphones, and as you do things, you kind of hear the like, it's in the well, go over there, do it, like that kind of stuff. And they really play with that, like while you're doing stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but essentially, you're going around solving puzzles. A lot of them are like alignment puzzles, where it's like, in order to unlock this thing, you need to find in the environment these two pieces of runes and find the perspective that lines those up, and that unlocks this door, so on and so forth. So those puzzles are fun. I'll say
Puzzles
this
don't
though,
happen often enough. Like Resident Evil just, I feel like it's
kills
them
it.
and nobody else.
Yeah. A lot of puzzles. Yeah, or it's like just puzzle games. I like games where it's kind of like mixed into the play,
Yeah.
rather than like to your point, rather than like all puzzles or no puzzles. But some games still do it well. But even Zelda kind of left them behind. Like there used to be like kind of puzzle dungeons, and I feel like they kind of did their big five or whatever in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which are, of course are great games, but I feel like even puzzles used to be a bigger part of those.
Yeah.
But um the combat was a little bit repetitive. The puzzles get repetitive in an 8-hour game. It's just so cinematic. Sometimes you're injured as a part of the story, and you're having to like essentially it becomes a very pretty, albeit, but like walking simulator where you're like slowly dragging your foot around and going somewhere. And I finished that one and I started the second one, and exactly what I'm describing happened within the first hour. And I literally had this moment where, as we talked about, like our time is limited. And so I'd gone through all of one to play two. Within an hour of two, I was like, I don't want to do this again. I don't want to go through this whole thing. If I'm curious enough, I'll watch a stream or something. I'll go 2 times through it to figure out what happens. But I'd heard mixed reviews anyway, and I kind of felt like it had already told the story it wanted to tell about all of those things and its take on what mental illness means and how people wrestle with it in the first game. And I got what I wanted out of it, and I just left it, which is something I'm trying to be better about this year, right? Like,
Yeah.
or I guess over the past year too, of like, if I don't love it, just
Yeah.
stop it. Like, if a piece of art doesn't, I don't want to say doesn't respect my time, because that game was doing what it wanted to do, but like, I just don't have enough time gaming anymore to like slog through something. If somebody tells me like, "Oh, you just got to get through the first 20 hours," I don't have that, Like, so I'll just
Yeah.
play 5 good 5-hour games, or like whatever, to get my 25 hours a game.
I'm in the
So that's
throes
my
of
number
that
five.
right now. Playing PlayStation, like, or playing PlayStation again, reintroducing the trophy system. I am
Mhm.
stuck firmly right now in if I start a game, I want to platinum that game.
Yeah, where does this come from? Is this the
I
idea?
don't know.
You once told me a long time ago, like you didn't like the Angry Bird system of
Yeah,
you need
because
to
I
get
would
3
go,
stars.
yeah, it's that all over again. Um,
Yeah. So
it's
you feel like you haven't played it if you don't platinum it anymore.
no, that's not it. I just want to platinum it. Like I want the trophy, the thing that's absolutely meaningless. I want that for some reason. So I'm thinking I'll get through it quick enough because I just can't like I can't do that. But not until after at least a little bit.
See, I would use it. Here would be my suggestion to you. Excuse me. I would say if you like a game enough, use it as your excuse to go back to it. Like, get your playthrough, and if you ever wanted to revisit it, platinuming it could be your reason. You know what I mean? But like, if you're tight on time, you're taking a game that might be 20 hours and making it 50 hours. So like, that's the way you need to think about it. If you're worried about time or not wanting platinum, or if you just love it, right? The only game I've ever platinum, I didn't even mean to platinum, and that was God of War, the original, like not the 2000, but like 2018 God of War. I
Mm-hmm.
platinumed that game without thinking because I wanted to go fight. I know you didn't finish that one, but one of the optional things are like go fight these 9 Valkyries, and that's where it went into like Souls territory. And and people will find out from my list over time, like that's my kind of game. Like I don't I enjoy banging my head against the wall for
Yeah.
3 hours against the boss if I need to. And the final Valkyrie is notoriously difficult, and I didn't even know it was going to get me a platinum, and I beat it, and it just like popped. And in my opinion, that's good game design. If like you just go to find everything and get it, that's pretty cool. But if you
Yeah.
got to be like, oh, I got to look up this guide and like twirl 6 times and go in this thing that you have no way to do it, like, come on. Or
Yeah.
remember when Brandon was playing Final Fantasy and needed to get like X amount of miles, so he left a rubber band on his controller to get a
Yeah.
platinum? Like, that's insane
Yeah.
to have to do that.
I it
So,
it must be so rare that it just happens like that. Because half of these, it has to be the developer just having a laugh. It has to
yeah,
be.
I think so. I think so too. All right, number 4. What do you got?
Ooh, I go back to my list.
Wait, are our lists? Oh, you thought I'd have 10. I got you. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I wonder why I thought you'd have to.
No, it's my bad. It's my bad. I kept it short. I went to look at my games of the other years, and I was like, oh, I only played 5 other games like that weren't from 2024. I was pretty 2024 focused this year.
All right, so my number 4. I don't know if this is spelled right or not. It looks crazy, but it's how I would say it. Well,
I can't say
are you a Ghost of Tsushima or a Ghost of
oh,
Tsushima? How do you
Ghost
say
of
that?
Tsushima.
of
So I think
Tsushima.
it's like a weird American thing to like add the accent in a random spot when I've been learning like typically it's actually more just like that natural roll, Tsushima. But I don't know which one's actually right.
Well, whichever it
I'm
is,
excited to talk about this.
I so when the PS5 Pro was announced, and I decided, I mean, I think I had consistently told y'all since the 5 was released, I'm gonna hold out until the Pro comes. I just built a PC, didn't have the budget, didn't need. Um, and so when they finally announced one of the announced, maybe the only real announced game alongside it was the one coming out now this year,
Yeah.
Ghost of Yote. And to kind of like get in the mindset to hype myself up, I decided I'm gonna go get Ghost of Tsushima, give it a go. I'm gonna get back into it, and honestly, that was probably getting back into gaming, even at the cadence that I am now, because I was very on the fence with um, Black Wukong. What is it?
Black Myth, yeah.
Black Myth Wukong. I was just about to pull the trigger on that one. Um, and then I saw that announcement, and it kind of seemed like the same style of game. So I was thinking, like, all right, well, I'm going to get ready for the PS5 Pro, so I'm going to do this one.
Yeah.
Similar to Baldur's Gate, it's a great game. I can tell it's a great game. I say am, I was getting lost in just riding around and trying to maximize everything rather than following like main story points. So no more, no further along than I am, probably like 20-30%. I feel like I could go beat bosses at like 60-70% because I'm just sitting here leveling up from doing some of the nonsense side quest. So again, it's not at the fault of it. It's beautiful. Um,
Right.
you
Yeah.
can ride around on that horse, go hunting, all of that. Like that's not really a bother. But it gave me the opportunity to get lost not playing the game.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a theme with open world, which for however long this channel lasts now, that's going to be a theme, and I'll bring it up again tonight at least once. Um, so I almost need to be saved for myself. And
Do you have I think I know that you finished Breath of the Wild.
yeah,
Have you ever finished another open world game?
no, the closest would be Elden Ring, and I haven't finished it yet.
That's crazy.
It's just
That's
I
crazy. We'll
gotta
talk about
have
that.
objectives. Stellar
That's
Blade,
cra
would you
I mean,
call that?
I get it because you and I are more aligned on that. Like if it were a spectrum and you're here on like on not finishing or loving, I mean, I guess it's not that you don't like them, but it just like doesn't work for like the way you approach games. Like, and this is people who love them and think they're the greatest games ever. And like, you know, the people who are like, it's the biggest map ever made. I love that. To me, like that's a turn off.
Yeah.
I don't like. I hate hearing it's the biggest map and it's a 200-hour game. I'm like, oh, you know, like I don't want more. Um, but I am much closer. Like if it were that spectrum, I'd be at like the 20% of that closer to you because I've certainly finished more, but I
Yeah.
fall off of them more than any other game for the exact same reason where I start off wanting to do everything and then I like peter off a little bit. So I'll only piggyback this one to say I have also played it and I have also fallen off of it. And maybe earlier than you. Like maybe I've put 5 or so hours into it.
Hmm.
Loved it. I think it does some really cool things, but um, I just never finished it. I think I will. Before Yodo comes, I think I will go back and play it because the combat does feel really good. I think the
Yeah.
story is really good. I think it does cool things with UI where it minimalizes things. You and I have talked about this before, but I love that rather than pulling up a map or having an ugly mini map, you like tap R3 or whatever or L3 and the like wind blows where you're supposed to go.
Right.
That's like cool design. I think
Oh,
it's got a
sorry. I should
setups.
add that the irony of me playing this game to get back into the PlayStation mindset, I bought it before I got the PS5 Pro, so I'm playing it on PC.
That is funny. Um, but it's a PlayStation exclusive at first, right? So Yodo
Yeah.
will come to PlayStation
Yeah.
for a while, yeah.
And I'll buy that
Cool.
game for sure, but I am already concerned that I'm not going to finish it.
Will you try
That
to finish
also will be
Tsushima
another
first?
theme for later tonight. What?
Will you try to finish Tsushima first, do you think? Because
I have not uninstalled it. For
Yeah.
reasons that'll come to light, I don't know. But I haven't uninstalled
Could
it.
you mentally, like in your mind, I mean, would you ever be okay to go back to that game and say, I'm gonna mainline it from where you are? Just like I will only do main quests, and that's what I'll do. Unless there's like a piece of armor you want, and you approach it from like a really rigid standpoint. Do you think you could ever do that? And just be like, I'm going main missions.
I think I could. I would almost have to, like, at that point, sedate myself to the point of, like, it's got to be second screen gaming at that point, or at least I've got to have something else on. Like, that's not going to be primary focus. Otherwise, it's just going to start to bother me.
Yeah.
But that is probably one thing I should say I didn't love about the game. The armors and the weapons, upgrading that stuff, changing armor sets seemed kind of irrelevant. And maybe I didn't make it far enough for that stuff to start mattering. But like the combat was not so hard that I had to have certain levels because I wasn't playing a hard mode. I was just doing story or whatever normal is.
Right.
And it wasn't hard enough that my weapon really mattered or my armor really mattered. And honestly, I don't care what it looks like because I don't understand it.
Yeah. I get that. All right. Fair enough. All right. Number 4 for me in the games of the other year category. As I figure out what I did with that particular tab. Somehow I like pulled out exclusively the box art for Hellblade. So I'm gonna have to pull that back up. Oh, I know what it is though. So mine is the DLC for the original Last of Us. I believe it was called. Now I have to actually pull it up.
I get confused by Last of Us things, at
Left
least looking
Behind.
at it in. It's called Left Behind DLC.
Yeah, The Last of Us Left Behind.
Yeah, if you go through
So
the
the
PlayStation
reason.
Store, they got all kinds of different art for it. PlayStation
Oh, I
4,
know.
PlayStation 5, remake. It's a
Well, the
lot.
problem is you've got remasters, you've got PC versions. Yeah. So there's nothing secret about this or special about this, but what happened was I had played it in order to catch up or be ready. I don't remember the order of what I had done, but because that whole DLC, and I'll talk about this, and we'll give a spoiler warning right now, actually, for everybody who cares about it. If you haven't played The Last of Us 1 for some reason and want to, or care about the show and haven't seen season 1, The Last of Us DLC Left Behind is the entire Riley episode. So what I'm talking about there is the whole episode where Ellie and Riley are in the mall and playing with the Halloween masks and the zombies come, and so again, spoiler tag.
That was
But
tough.
ultimately Riley is bitten, as well as Ellie, and that's where she finds out she's immune. But that story was a DLC later, and I wanted to be familiar with it before watching the show. I think, or I had seen the show and was curious how they handled it in the game. I don't remember the order necessarily, but it's obviously handled great. The Last of Us Part 2 is in my top 5 favorite games of all time. I think it's incredible. Cue all the haters down in the comments. I'm not even going to talk to you about why, but you must play that before the show. It has to happen, or it will ruin it. And we can talk about why. That could be its own podcast. But but if I tell you why, it will ruin it.
Yeah,
It's hard.
right. Yeah, no, don't say anything because at this point, in order to get one of the PlayStation trophies for the 30th anniversary or whatever it just was it 30th?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had to download one of those games and I was like, well, this is the only one that I actually want to play. So I rented the part 2. It's really the only reason that trying to get those trophies is the only reason I went and got the PS Plus Premium, whatever they call it, so that I can rent
Yeah.
things. So it's installed on my machine right now as a rental. That's until I play it. That's the only reason that I have that level of PS Plus still. So
Yeah.
and I know you said that about the show. I'll play it, but I'm not ready
Here's
for it
how I
to
would
take
define
off.
it without any spoilers.
Yeah.
The show will be good and it will do great, but there's an aspect of that story that we will talk about at length. I think after you watch, I think it'd be a fun podcast episode or something. That does a really cool thing that a show will not be able to do, I believe. And again, once you see it or play it, I can tell you what that is. But uh, it does something with storytelling that a show can't do, because part of what it tries to do is to have you play, like control someone. And I think the impact of playing as a character doesn't, it's not the same if you're just observing them in a show or watching it, as
Yeah.
having to control them and make decisions and do things. And so it playing with that in the way it tells the story it wants to in like a significant way is really cool. And so I firmly believe that while it will be a great show, it won't be as impactful as the story it tries to tell. As like it's one of the few times I've seen video games as a medium tell a story. I mean, like that's something you can only do with a game that you can't do with a show. Like literally, like spending time in someone's shoes. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
in like a real kind. So anyway, Left Behind, loved it. It's more of The Last of Us. You obviously play as Ellie, which you only did for small stints in part one. Obviously, part two like is a little more split. Like there's more time with Ellie, and I think that it's cool to like be with her and just tell the story of her and Riley, which is cool. And but ultimately, it's Last of Us. It's less combat. It's more like puzzles and storytelling. Which is what I like the most about Last of Us anyway. Like, and as a zombie game as a whole, like the zombies are kind of in the backseat in that game anyway, right? Like it's more about the relationships.
I remember that being like a redeeming quality for me, because it's like I'm not prepared for the darkness of this game. And it's like it's not that bad. Do you know
wait till we play part two.
do you know when the show is coming out?
April.
It's really soon. Okay.
April, yeah.
There's probably no chance that we'll have finished our first series before then, is there?
No, no. But it could be a blind spot or something you play on your own and just talk about or whatever. I think like to realistically finish it by April, you're gonna need to play it off stream on your own. But I think it'd be cool to then maybe dedicate an episode to us discussing it, because you might love it and you might hate it, and either one I think would lead to fun content. But
okay.
Anyway, all right, number 3. We can start picking. Who cares? What are we gonna rush for? We don't need to rush. Go number 3.
Number 3 for me, from the Mamador people, Minoria. I think it's from the Mamador people.
It is. I think his name is R. Dean. I want to give him love. He's awesome.
So this game specifically, the art on it is one of those that you load up and it just strikes you a little bit differently than everything else. It's super smooth. It's just a fun game. All of the Mamador games, they're just fun, and they kind of tell a pretty linear story, and it's pretty simple gameplay. I don't think the map worked the way that the very first one did, which is still like my standard for maps, where you finish an area and it just kind of changes its color for you entirely. I don't think either of the
Resident Evil effect.
Yeah, very much like that. But this, if I remember right, the first Mamadora just full on, like it changes that room color on your map.
Yeah, which we should tell everyone who's not familiar, because this is the first one we probably touch on that isn't like very maybe necessarily as well known. These are sort of like tight combat, tough boss Metroidvania games, or at least action platformers. I think they're Metroidvanias though, right? You get skills that can let you access new areas, like a double jump or whatever. I think that happened.
Yeah.
I get this, Mamadora, and Ender Lilies all kind of like mixed up in the way they play.
Ender Lilies is another really good example of just that art style. Yeah, I was going to see if I could pull up like a trailer or something for it real quick. I might do that while you're going through yours.
Well, I'll talk a little bit more about Minoria while you're bringing it up, actually, because I've played it as well. It's on my list. I played it last year, but I liked it as well. I think the only thing, so they called it a spiritual successor. So there was Mamadora 1, 2, 3, and then one called Reverie Under the Moonlight, which is the game that you and I both discovered that series in, which is the 4th Mamadora game, I believe. Then they said Minoria was a spiritual successor by the same people. But the art style was a little bit different. It was a little more like polished, a little less pixel, which looked good, but is just, you can let it play. A little less to my taste.
I'm not sure about the volume on it, so
go ahead.
It's pretty loud.
I don't hear yours. No, I don't. We don't hear it, which is good. I think that's to be expected. But yeah, this is. So you can see like the art style here is a little more polished, almost like, I don't know if chibi is the right word. I can't remember if that's the word, but like it almost looks like paper cutouts or something, and I think it's cool, but I actually prefer the like pixel art style on these games. And the nun story like was a little weirder to me, like less my taste than the like witchy kind of stuff of Mama Dora. And
Yeah.
I'm nitpicking. I still loved it. I mean, it essentially feels like the same game, but
I
um,
like that when
I
these
just
kind of
think it a
games like it's
little
doing right there. Like they show
yeah, the
emotion by
shakies.
how the characters themselves
Exactly.
behave. I will say
That
this
is
one was
cool.
a little sexy unnecessarily. Um, so
Can't wait
like,
to hear you talk about one of your later games.
well, I think it's I expected it in that later game. This one, like this is the game that I played testing out streaming to my TV upstairs from my computer in the basement. And
Yeah.
so it worked. I was so incredibly excited that it worked. I thought I was going to be doing that a lot more frequently. But there are points of this game that are now showing where my wife walking through, I actually care less about seeing, but my daughter, um,
Yeah, yeah. You're like, whoa, this is a sexy nun.
yeah, like I make sure still at this point, I don't even watch shows where somebody might be fighting or something like that. Like I was watching
Mm.
one kung fu kind of show and a guy beat the crap out of someone with a golf club. And I realized she was in the room with me and I'm like, "Oh, nope. Can't watch that. You're not about to start picking stuff up and hitting people with it." So, aside from the combat that's going on that I didn't want her to see, it was also like just a little extra. It's one of
Yeah,
those games that I would like be listening before I kind of turned the volume up to where I couldn't hear anybody anymore.
yeah.
Also,
I
apologies.
get
If that is as loud on the stream as it was in my ears, then there's gonna be a brief second where that was tough. But I probably just
you. If
muted
that
altogether.
happened, if that happened, I don't know about it because it didn't come through to me, but that doesn't necessarily mean it. It's very possible it was that loud on stream. In which case, sorry everybody.
Yeah.
Um, I would say in the future we can just mute them in case like there's
Yeah.
nothing to come from the sound anyway.
Yeah, I was trying to show
Uh,
gameplay, so why to do or why do I need sound anyways?
yeah. Okay. My number 3 is speaking of games. There's actually a couple of these on here. Speaking of games that are just puzzle games, this was a blind spot game for me that I played this year that I hadn't played before that everybody loves, and that is Portal. I had never played Portal. Have you played Portal?
I have never played Portal, but I've heard it mentioned many times over.
Yeah, so there's 2 of them. Everybody loves the second one, but I obviously, if I'm gonna play 2, I'm gonna play 1. That's just how I wanna be. And I loved it. I'm not gonna, like, really harp on it too much, but it's a really clever puzzle game, the mechanics of which are mostly centered around the idea that you have a gun that can shoot essentially a blue portal and an orange portal into different places. So, say I shoot a orange portal on the ground and a blue portal up on the ceiling. I can't remember which one is where you start or finish, or if it matters, but I could then jump into the ground and fall out of the portal I shot on the ceiling to access a new area or hit a switch or whatever. So you're constantly playing with like the physics of shooting something into a wall. Like, so say there's a big gap, I can put a portal in the wall and shoot a portal at the other wall, walk through the one next to me, and I would come out on the other side. I've solved that puzzle. It's ultimately like an evolving version of that kind of puzzle solving, which constantly challenges the brain. I really enjoyed it. I don't think I need to harp on it. Most people are pretty familiar with it. But if you want a game that is just pretty short, I want to say less than 10 hours. And I actually, Portal 1 might be less than 5 hours. It's great for that. I've heard too is like J.K. Simmons narrates it. It gets kind of funnier and has more fun with kind of the stuff. And I'm excited to go play that next. It's on my coming up to play this year.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, you'll hear it on our games of the other years at the end of this year. But that's Portal.
All right. Moving right along.
Let's hear your number 2.
Number
Remember, you got to
two,
tell me because I can't read this tiny text. So what is it?
yeah, number two, I think you might actually be surprised. But you said that though. Do you think that anyone watching can read the text?
Oh no, they can. It's just
Okay.
I have you real tiny.
Okay.
You're good.
Yeah, I think you'll be a little
I'll look at
surprised here.
Go for it.
Elden Ring for me. This is
I can see it. By the way,
this is obviously a fantastic game. I would say you and me in particular, Brandon to an extent. If we were to kind of summarize our games that we play, they would be Soulsborne, Souls likes like that. We are very much caught up in that. That is our core. I would say, or at
That and
least what
Metroidvania, I
appeals
would say,
to
like,
us
make up.
most.
Yeah, I would say that and Metroidvanias, especially for you and I, make up like 80% of what we enjoy, probably.
Yeah. So that we've already talked about it before. The reason this is number 2 and not number 1, the open world nature of it.
Yep.
I don't know if it's entirely that, but couple that with how big the game is, and it's too big. I have no idea what's happening. I'll play the game for playing the game and it's fun, but I think through, I get to a point and I'll just kind of remember back where I've been. I'll do a little through the years type of thing with it. It's like that's not even the same game. That was so long ago.
Yeah.
So
Can I stop you real quick on this too? Do
yeah.
you remember before it came out? I don't know if you followed the news close enough, but obviously like particularly FromSoft is like my favorite thing of all time. Like I follow them closely. I've got books about them, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They said that Elden Ring. Now they speak very deliberately, but I remember them saying you can finish this game in 50 hours. That can't be possible. Maybe if you're like a speed runner, but that's actually insane. I want to say my final playtime on my first playthrough was like 150 hours.
Yeah. I think if I were to open my Steam, like granted, I got to a point and then I forgot what was happening and I stopped. And so I restarted. But I think I don't know if you remember, I'm either 200 or 300 hours in and I haven't beat it yet. But like 50 hours, not only you've got to be speed running, but you've got to be either very good at these games or maybe there is no other. You have to be
I think
very
that's it.
good because that's not
You
very
could be under
leveled.
level.
That's not very,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Anyway, so this is a perfect game. One of my favorite let's play groups, I guess. At some point, we'll probably mention them specifically, but I where they are, where I am has kind of lined up, so I've just pushed pause until they start going again. To me, my favorite thing with this
Oh,
is
that's why you stopped. I haven't thought about that. That makes sense. You're on break with them. I got
yeah,
you.
yeah.
We can
So
talk about it. I like plugging other channels. It's RKG. They're
yeah.
former IGN guys that are. They did prepare to try like a whole series of Souls playthroughs that we've enjoyed. And around Elden Ring, if you're not familiar with it, for everybody, they've done a let's play, but also like turn it into like a universe of coverage, including like round table, like post game coverages, discussions, questions, and then their sort of quote lore master has done essentially like master classes to help people like understand really specific parts of the lore that trickle into the whole story,
Mm-hmm.
which I am interested because you do enjoy them so much that hasn't helped you um, connect with it more than you, or maybe it has helped you connect with it more than you otherwise would, but not to the degree where you're like, it's your number one game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, so that is the thing that kind of helps keep me connected to it.
Do you think you would have stopped otherwise?
No, I would have just kept playing and just killed the thing in front of me. Not really understood where it fit in any kind of a story. But yeah, so
Yeah.
they're on break right now and they are just barely behind where I got to. And so for me, this
Okay.
game is more fun. Every week they put out a new section. I just
Yeah.
play my game along there so that I kind of get lore in real time at that point.
And you know where to go or whatever too.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it would definitely help keep me in it and even better kind of contextual grounding with it, except that their episodes come out once a week and I don't have the time to play it any more frequent than alongside them. Like if I
Yep.
could sit there and fire up an episode a night or something like that, I'm sure I'd be done quicker and I'd have the best understanding of it. But
Yeah.
that's just not the schedule these days.
Yeah. I got you. That makes sense to me. Um, well, I've obviously played it. It's my favorite game of all time, and that's fair. It's different strokes. I think what is weird though is like I've thought about this a lot lately. Like if FromSoft though, like if I could choose, it is my favorite game of all time. But if I could choose, if I got an Elden Ring 2 or like a Dark Souls 4, I'd probably still choose Dark Souls 4. And I
What
know
about
if
a
part of that's
Bloodborne 2?
just like, I mean, I would choose that over anything, but I've just accepted we'll never get it. I mean, Bloodborne is the one that got me, like, literally was the first one. That's the
You were the
first
one
game I
of the
ever.
three of us where, like, you are really beating that drum. Where Brandon and I were both a little more like, dude, this is kind of dark. people just walking
Yeah.
around screaming nonsense. And now, like, I'm right there with you for sure. I don't think Brandon is. I think it destroyed him to beat that game. But
Yeah. Oh, I've only ever seen him get as mad as he did against Ibriatas or whatever, and that's the only talk about mellow. Like he is a mellow guy, and that's the maddest I've ever seen him.
yeah,
But yeah, there was something about that that clicked. And similarly to what you're doing with RKG, I found a guy, Epic Name Bro, who's still around, big soul streamer, um, who had helped make the guide for it, had a really cool playthrough that just made it great because those games are so like obtuse and like indirect in the way they expect you to learn about things. It was really nice to be able to like I would play as far as I could, and then I would either get stuck or just stop a playthrough and then watch his playthrough up to point X to see if I'd missed something or where secret stuff was. And I could go back and do it and be like, oh, I didn't know there was a boss up on this bridge or whatever it might have been. And there was something about that connection that like he got me through this game that otherwise I'd heard people be like, dude, this is hard. Or, because if you remember, like Central Yarnum specifically was like a skill check of like, if you can't get through past this bonfire, you won't like this game. And I hit that wall, and that's why I Googled. I was like, am I insane? Like, is this video game broken? Do I not understand something? And just having somebody to kind of guide you through it. But anyway, yeah, that game got me into them all. And I would choose Bloodborne too. And I actually have hope. Sony bought like a large stake in the company that owns FromSoft. And I actually think maybe that's the thing that will get us over the finish line. Not that I hate that Bloodborne's a PlayStation exclusive. I want everyone to be able to play that game.
yeah,
It's like I said, it was the gateway for me. I want a 60 FPS version. I want a remaster. I want a remake. I want a sequel. Um, but all of that to say, I like what I liked about Elden Ring was that I just think it's cool to watch what FromSoft does and to watch them see a game like Breath of the Wild and be like, we're gonna try to do that next and see their spin on it. And I was like, this is exactly what I would want if FromSoft made a Breath of the Wild game, and it was that. And I liked like
yeah,
that's the most sense of like true exploration I've ever found in a game. Where I was like, dude, what do I see over there? And rarely in a FromSoft game, if you decide to check it like a nook and cranny, do they not reward you with something, right?
yeah.
Like that's a cool thing.
I hate that for every other game I have ever played, though.
Yeah. Yeah, because now you don't. Every
Yeah,
other game, you're like, oh, if I turn left and go around this corner, there should be something there. There's not.
that is why in Ghost of Tsushima, I'm just sitting here clearing out smoke on the map or fog, whatever they call it, because no stone unturned in freaking Dark Souls.
Yep.
Elden Ring is a game that if you told me as good as that game was, given kind of what went into making it, if they also made an equal effort series, like the Game of Thrones of it, a show, I would play that show rather than play this game. I would watch that show rather than play this game.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if because there's enough content there. So what's interesting about FromSoft, and I'm interested to see if they ever tackle, is like, how do I define this? Like their games are often in the aftermath of something. So like in Dark Souls, like all the kings are gone. The world's about to like fall into embers, and are you going to burn it and relight it? Whatever, who cares? Bloodborne, same deal, right? Like the disease is spreading. It's mostly happened. You're kind of seeing the aftermath. Elden Ring's the same way. The shattering has happened. All the gods and lords of the rings and fought and whatever. Like I like that. It's a cool way to uncover the story, but there's enough there in Elden Ring. I think that if you wanted to reverse it and tell the story of the Shattering and all these gods who were fighting over the pieces and whatever, you could do it. Although I don't know visually how you could tackle it. But I am interested to see if FromSoft ever makes a game where like there's a town with people and it's like not vibrant in terms of like colors, but like people are walking around. You can go up to a shopkeeper and talk to them rather than like a decrepit skeleton in a
Yeah,
corner who sells you everything. Like I'm just interested if they'll ever do that. They don't even make their characters' mouths move yet.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Be like a
and
Dark
I don't know if
Souls
they will.
Dragon
Like
Quest.
sometimes they know their weaknesses and they'll leave it, but we'll see.
Yeah, that would be
All right.
super weird if you did have a Dark Souls Dragon Quest where it was
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah.
overly PG. Like that would be
Oh
wild.
yeah. I don't think they'll ever do that because he likes dark fantasy, but um you could do dark fantasy still though. Like Game of Thrones teeters on dark fantasy, but like you could have a Game of Thrones world where there's still people there. They're just still. It's not like vibrant colors or
Hmm.
they're not nice or everyone's got ulterior motives. I'm fine with that. I just like I'd be interested to go back and play, like, if they did Dark Souls 0 and you're actually playing, like, all like, Gwyn is around and, like, Gwyneth is around or Gwendolyn's around, and, like, all these people are, like, in their peaks rather than, like, decrepit forms of themselves and everything else is gone.
Yeah, we get to see old Leonard running through the fields in all his glory.
Yeah.
Right? Is that the horse's name? Leonard?
I uh oh, in Elden Ring, yeah,
Yeah.
Leonard. Yeah, yeah, that he crushed with his gravity weight or whatever, or without his gravity weight, he didn't crush him.
Yeah.
Alright, number 2, I want you to go ahead and pull up, a trailer for this one without sound. I played a game called Venba, Venba. This is a pretty, unique game, not in the sense that nobody's ever heard of it. This was on a lot of people's game of the year list last year, and that's why I played it this year because I heard a lot of people talk about it. Essentially, um, I wanna say you're, like, the child, in, like, a young, or, like, a younger Indian family, and it tells the story of kind of this family through specifically their cooking. So like you learn about all these family dynamics, a mom, a dad, whatever. But like a lot of it is sort of like solving the puzzles of how you cook these certain things. Like there might be an instruction or a page is missing, and you're kind of by trial and error learning how to cook and do these things. But at the same time, that's helping you like uncover the story of what you learn about your mom or how you moved away from college or what happened with your dad. And it was just like kind of a really unique way to like see a coming of age tale of someone growing up. Really interesting art style, and I really enjoyed the game. I want to say it was only like 2 or 3 hours long, um, and it's like of a culture like I'm familiar with Indian culture to a degree, but not any specific intricacies. Like, what's it like in the home? What's the cooking like? What does that mean to a family? So it's pretty cool to see done in that way and watch this like tiny family drama unfold. So Venba was my number 2 game of not 2024.
All right. Interesting addition. Relative to the list. I like that. I like that we
Yeah,
have, and well, I think we'll see more of it as we go, but I like that we have more explorative art styles popping up in here. It's not
yeah,
all
for
just
sure.
like max settings, graphics, all that kind of stuff.
I'm sitting on the edge of my seat for this. What is it? Your number
Uh,
one game that wasn't from this year. Remember, I can't read it, so you gotta tell me.
Resident Evil 4.
Oh, of course. I should have known that. It's coming.
Um, I never really know how to describe these games because I don't enjoy being scared.
Hmm.
You did tell me up front this one is probably the least scary, and I agree that it was. I think you probably have my
Of
list
the original
memorized.
four, I should say. Like 5, 6 become full blown action games. I just want to throw that out there. But
Sure.
yeah, of the OGs.
You've probably got my list memorized as far as what I've played, as well as I do. I think it's 7. I think it's in order 2, 7, 8, 4. I
Yeah,
don't think I did 3 because
it's not great.
does the whatever his name is, does he chase you like Mr. X does?
Nemesis.
Nemesis?
Like he's like I almost said Professor X. What was that guy's name in 2? Something X.
Mr. X.
Mr. X?
Or
Yeah.
just X. I mean, X
Whatever
gonna
it
give
is,
it to
that
me. That's
guy.
all I remember from. Yeah.
X gonna give it to you. Yeah. How he would show up, but just for specific segments.
Yeah.
3 is like that, but like up to a different degree. And you and I both don't love that sort of like, oh
I
God, like
do
hurry,
not want
hurry,
to be
hurry. Kind of,
chased. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I mean, this game had it all. Played it on PC, which was a lot of fun. Even after I finished, I considered whether or not it was worth doing on PlayStation to get a trophy, try and platinum. But I do not have it in me to do all that. I've watched so many videos of people platinuming that game. It's like it's the same video. It's just who are you watching to put it out? But it's still just so fascinating. And the game looks
Yeah.
so good. I think I've not landed on a let's play of someone that I really loved watching, but I've bounced around and tried so many, and I'm fine with it because it's just fun to watch. RKG right now, I'm not a paid patron anymore, so I'm at episode 1, but they're playing this game, and I could not be more excited for that group to play this game.
I forgot that you're gonna be able to watch it with them. That's cool.
Yeah. But it's got the look, it's got the gameplay, it's got the graphics, and I think probably more than any other game on this list. Like I would not say that it's the top 5 game for me. It's up there somewhere, but I'm not lobbing all this praise to say it's the greatest thing ever. But more than any other game on here, not only did I feel like I was playing with a purpose, but whenever I logged out, which I had to do it a lot, I can only play so much of that game at a time, I was very eager to come back to it. I knew what I
Yeah.
had done when I came back to it. Like the closest thing to that, and we'll talk about this at some point, is Stellar Blade. I love that game. I love coming back to that game, but I don't have like the draw to get back is not as direct. Like Resident
Yeah.
Evil, I need to get back so that I can go do XYZ. That's what's next. I can't wait to start and finish this next chapter kind of a thing. Whereas like a Stellar
Yep.
Blade, which I enjoy the game itself as much, it's it's more of like a general draw versus like a very targeted, I got to get back in there to do this thing. I don't think there's a
Right.
lot of games that I've played. Um, Maybe not even like a Dark Souls because they're not open world necessarily, but they're so whatever you would call that, bi-directional, omnidirectional. Like
Yeah.
it's not a linear story like that. So it might be as good as anything as far as just dragging me through it and me just following blindly.
I think what's cool too is so I played Resident Evil because it's a lot of people's favorite Resident Evil, right? So I've always been curious about it. But there hadn't I mean, they put it on a lot of platforms, and I want to say when um I think you could play it on Switch or something, and it's older, so it performs fine. And that made it like mobile enough for me to play. And kind of is nice to play an old school feeling game on the Switch. So I played the
Mhm.
original, which has like the tank controls where you stop to shoot,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
You know what I mean? It feels dated. You know, the way you aim feels dated. I can't remember the exact technical thing, but there's something about the way the controls work that feels odd. But I still got through it because it's fun. There's a lot of things we've talked about that were really annoying in that version, specifically like Ashley, I think is her name, just being like Leon, Leon
yeah,
all the time, and
yeah.
um, stuff that like kind of is so dumb, including the vendor. When every time you'd come up to him, he'd just be like, "What are you buying?" Literally, only
I
that. They
really expected there was going to be a reveal, and like he was a guy in my story, and I
nope,
guess I forgot about it, but that never came.
no, that never came. Um, but all these things that were like quirks that honestly did become charming and they were cool. But it was awesome to play that game. Not, I don't remember if I knew a remake was coming or not, but I played them at least a year apart, and then to go play four remake and be like, dang, like, and this is true of all their remakes, honestly. Like, but I hadn't played Resident Evil 1 or 2 to kind of see the way they were remade in comparison to the original until this one. And that's how you remake a game, dude. It's not a new skin. It keeps every part you remember from it that mattered, you know, while adding to it. So it's not like they
Right.
changed it so much that you're like, dang, I love this part and it's gone. That's all there. Every memorable part is there, and everything they've added made it better. It looked amazing. Everything about those games feel good. The way menus look, the way clicks feel. Like it sounds stupid to
Mm.
say, but like it's just satisfying to play them. I love arranging my stupid briefcase to make sure I can fit as much shit as possible. Like I'm just really a big fan of where Capcom is, honestly, as an overall company right now. I'll be truthful with you, but specifically with the Resident Evil series, I'm just thrilled. Like anytime I hear about a remake, I hope they go and remake one again. I know they've remade one, but they remade it like 10 or 15 years ago. I
Mm-hmm.
would love to see like a version of 2, 3, 7, 8 done for the very first game, you know, just because it's the OG. And I'd like to do that. So I'm not surprised to hear that. As soon as you said it, I was like, oh, duh. Of course, that's your top game of the other year. Mine, my number one game of the other year is another full on puzzle game that I did not expect to like.
Okay.
At the very beginning, almost a year ago, I want to say right now, I played the Talos Principle, which is um, you're like a robot
LE or
on an
AL?
island. Do what?
LE or AL?
Uh,
Principal.
oh,
LE?
PLE. Yep,
Okay.
not like the guy who runs the school.
Yeah. Well, I know
Um,
the art is like the hand with the cat or something. I didn't know if that
yeah,
was the
yeah,
principal.
yeah. No, it's a concept, right? I think of like finding out if something is an AI or not. I think is like what
Okay.
it means.
I'm in.
Talos Principle. Let me make. I don't want to
Wait, so
misinform
is
our
this a
people.
thing that exists outside of the game? Is the Talos Principle a
Yeah, the
real?
Talos Principle is like an idea outside the game.
Okay, that's cool.
It says the Talos Principle is Stratton's famous empirical claim that what it is to be human is reducible to mechanical explanations. So essentially, what makes a human is the Talos principle.
Wow.
And the game explores that. You're an AI solving these puzzles while some kind of creator kind of is commanding you, but then there are these terminals. So basically, it's like hubs, and you go and solve like in a room will be a puzzle, and that puzzle might take you 3 to 5 minutes to solve, and that's unlocking pieces for you to like unlock section X, so that you can move on to like section Z, so on and so forth. But in the midst of all those are these like old school, DOS looking green on black computer terminals where you can kind of like talk, enter commands and do things, and you can kind of see someone like hacking through to you to be like they're messing with you, dude. Like don't do it. That's kind of breaking a little bit of the like what otherwise would have just been like go solve the puzzle, go solve the puzzle. There's like a larger thing happening around you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure everybody's played it, but I just don't want to spoil it just in case. But like essentially that continues to build as you ultimately the game mechanic though is to go and just solve all these puzzles to unlock pieces that let you continue in the game. And the puzzles can be anything from like lasers to teleporters to these replay things where you create like a clone of yourself that can go stand on a button that lets you access another area. And obviously they'll like introduce a mechanic to you, um, or things that like disrupt laser walls so you can move through, but you only have so many. And they'll introduce a mechanic, then they'll introduce another mechanic, and sometimes the one mechanic just keeps building until it gets more complex, and then all of a sudden they drop in one of the other ones you've seen, so on and so forth, until by the end you're solving a puzzle you never could have solved right if somebody had just thrown you in it right away. But they just like the developers did such a good job of training your brain to start thinking about all the ways you could solve stuff with the 5 different tools they give you throughout the game. And there's a sequel to it now that I'm definitely going to play this year. It's on my coming up list, like within my next 3 or 4 games. Not anything that I do on stream or anything, but because I'm too stupid to play puzzles on stream. That'd be awful to watch. But I love sitting there and trying to figure out and trying not to Google something. Like I used to shy away from puzzle games because I'd feel like I got stuck and I'd feel dumb. But it's been nice to just like give myself the time, maybe have a podcast on and just like accept
Mm.
like this is good for me to try to like work this out. You know what I mean? Like power
I
through
mean,
it, and you
literally
can
good
feel
for
that.
you. We're not getting
Yeah.
younger. This is not a new game, right? Like I feel like I've seen this again. Like I've got the
Oh, it's
artwork
old. I
in my
mean,
mind, and I
yeah.
remember
Tell
seeing
us.
that a long time ago.
Yeah, the sequel came out last year, but the original game is 10 years old, 2014.
And so you just played it, I guess, this year. What
Yeah, so
what
my
drew you to it?
my
Like,
my
had it?
stepdad. Sorry, what?
I think you're about to say it. Keep going.
My stepdad, yeah, he's like a gamer, but not like super intense about it, and it's like his favorite game of all time. Like he
Oh,
plays the DLCs that get really hard, the mods. People do like created levels that are mods that you can go and do yourself, and like he swore by it to the point where like one time I was staying with them over a Thanksgiving break, and they had just released it for Switch, and I was like, oh, it'd be cool to bond with this. He could help me. I'll just try it, and it hooked me then. And I want to say like I got stuck and just kind of fell off at that time. Came back like a year later and was like, I'm gonna finish this game. I just loved it.
I mean, I didn't realize. Maybe you started that by saying you played it on Switch, but a puzzle game on Switch is just. I mean, that's a perfect marriage. So that's great for that game.
Yeah, it worked out nicely. It's on Switch. It was better. I mean, I think what honestly happened though is I did play it on Switch, and then when I did get the PC, like it looked so much better on PC. I did eventually switch,
Yeah.
but that was nice to be able to play. Now with the Steam Deck is actually what broke me through with it. I played on Steam Deck, so same idea.
Yeah, handheld.
Be able to sit and have it on TV and be like, I'm gonna solve one, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm gonna do 3 more because I just did one. It's like
Yeah.
because it is 2 3 minute puzzles, so there's no reason to not go up to the next chamber in your little open hub to keep solving. So
I'm kind of new to that idea. I've just started it here with, I think a game we'll touch on later, but using games as breaks is not something I'd ever done before. The gaming was the thing I was doing. And so
yeah,
recently with work, if I need just like especially now where it's so cold, I'm not going to go outside. The walks with the dogs are fewer and farther between. Now they've got a yard they can run in and I can stay warm. But like those same 10 to 15 minutes, I'll just hop in a game and play it just to kind of reset my mind and then go back
yep.
into work. And I don't really know. I mean, I haven't been remote my whole life, so that's why I couldn't do it. But even in the 3, 4 years, however, 4 years since we've been remote, I kind of wish that I would have started that sooner because they don't have to be the main focus. They can be the coffee bean for the thing you don't really want to be doing.
If you ever felt the itch, honestly, both games I mentioned, Portal and Talos, would be good options for games like that. Like because you can pick it up and be like, I'm gonna knock out a puzzle while they're outside, call it good. But either way, I totally agree. And there's something about those. And what's nice is like types of games can be breaks for other types of games. Or like a puzzle game can really
Yes.
challenge your
Yeah.
mind
Yeah.
and then make you be like, I just need an action game. Like I don't have to solve a puzzle. I'm gonna go play Souls. And then Souls obviously has the physical demand on you that suddenly might make you like, I want to slow it down, put
Right.
on a podcast, listen to the mellow music as like I'm in this beautiful, like Roman looking Colosseum solving these, Talos Principle puzzles, so on and so forth. So there's something about that too that's nice to like switch genres of the games you're playing.
Yeah. I feel that.
Cool.
That's
All
why I
right.
always have like
That
three
was games
games
of the other
installed.
year. Well, let me run through them all again really quickly for anyone who's already forgotten. But you had Baldur's Gate, Ghost of Tsushima, Minoria, Elden Ring, Resident Evil 4. I had Hellblade, Last of Us Left Behind, Portal, Venba, and the Talos Principle. And those are our best games of the other years, or as I like to call them from a podcast I'd like to call out into the Aether, they call them Go Toys, games of the other years. Um, those are our top 10 in totality of those. So
I
I
feel
didn't
like
want
I
to start
mostly
negative.
play Go Toys.
Do I? Yeah.
That's my
I
forte.
uh I didn't want to start negative, so that's why we did those first. But
Mm.
we'll now jump to biggest disappointment, which I think we can glaze through quickly. I think it'll be interesting though to hear a game that we were maybe excited about or interested in, and then let down by some aspect of it. Um,
You
you went
please
first on
go
the last one.
first.
Oh, me go first.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
I
would
was gonna
like you to
say,
go first.
yeah, I'll go first here. Mine, I don't know if it'll surprise you or not, or if you even knew I played this game, but my biggest disappointment this year is a game I genuinely thought might have actually been on my top 10 list, and instead is my bottom ranked game of the year. I And it's not even that it was that bad. I did not love Dragon's Dogma 2. I played the first one. It's a really janky, odd game that came out around the same time as Dark Souls. A lot of people compare the two just in
Mm.
the sense of like they're these kind of obscure, obtuse games that are obviously set in similar eras and have similar vibes, right? Kind of that like darker medieval game. They're combat focused, but um, the combat felt clunky in Dragon's Dogma 1, but it had an interesting story to tell. Like it just felt unfinished. The fast travel felt odd. It was sort of really um demanding in the way of like, oh, you die, now you've got to walk 10 minutes worth of time across this area again because of the way the save points work. A lot of that happened in 1, and I was like, I'm excited for 2. Capcom, as I think, does Capcom make that game? I think they do. Um, like I just said, they've been killing
Yeah.
it lately, and I was like,
Yeah.
cool, here it comes.
It didn't last long.
They're gonna fix it, and they did fix a lot of things. It looks really good. The idea of it's cool. All the classes you can pick. They have this cool pawn system where like you essentially have a partner, and the things you do with your partner. So say I find a cave, and I go into that cave, and I find a treasure in there. The pawn system, you then also hire 2 more people into your party out of these sort of like zones, so that you always have a party of 4, and you're hiring other people's pawns to come with you. So obviously they're not really there, but whatever has happened to them in their playthrough, they bring to your game. So in the sense of if I'm running through a field and they're like, "Hey, come with me. I know a shortcut, or I know there's a treasure over here," and they'll start running, and you can hit a button to acknowledge that, and
Hmm.
you can go follow them in, and they'll lead you to a treasure. That's all cool. It's like really cool in concept of what it is. But the obscure stuff they threw into this game that like was unnecessarily convoluted or not user friendly or like bad from like a quality of life perspective was stunning. And they take pride in it, like some of their quirks, and that's fine. And some people might have this in their top 5 games, and I could see why. It's like a real life Dungeons and Dragons campaign where like you can go do something and completely screw yourself.
Yeah.
I don't love that. I don't like to feel like my time's wasted. I could see a time in life where maybe I would have. Um, but I'm going to tell you an example of what I'm talking about, and this is not a lie. This is a real thing in the game. Spoiler warnings if you don't know this can happen in Dragon's Dogma. It's not a conclusion, it's just like an event that can happen. But they talk about your pawn, you'll just be running around. They're like, yeah, I heard about this thing where like pawns are kind of going crazy. I don't know what's going on. Like, watch out for it when we hire people. And you're like, okay, cool. Well, if you hire a pawn or if you do a certain thing with your pawns, I don't even know what the thing is. They'll kind of start saying shit that's a little weirder. And then eventually you might notice like their eyes are kind of red and you're like, what is happening? Oh no, my pawn might have this thing. Oh, that pawn essentially has like a pawn STD and will like spread it to your pawn. They'll die. And I want to say it can like wipe out the entire hub town for you in your Dragon's Dogma game. And I think there's stuff you can use to bring characters back. but I'm just like, why is this a thing? Now I could see a world where that's funny, but when something
Yeah.
bad happens that's funny in a game, I only think it's funny if it means it cost me like 5 minutes of time. Where like I fall off a bridge because a dragon knocked me off and something crazy happened. I'm totally fine with that. But to be like, everyone's dead and gone, and I think I might be misremembering some of the details, but it is bad. Like it will ruin your playthrough to a degree unless you have certain things to bring the people back or are willing to invest a certain amount of time. That's just like one sort of like microcosm of the larger problem that I have with this game, which is like, dude, just like give me a little more respect for my time. Give me fast travel totems that aren't limited items that I can put down to get around. Don't make me take a horse and carriage to get from point A to point B in real time, which by the way, will probably get like swooped down on by like giant death eagles and kill everyone on the carriage anyway. This is all things that really happen in the game, and I'm just trying to get to my next destination. So
Yeah.
um,
That's a
that's
lot.
it's clearly yeah, it's probably a lot that's just not for me. I could see a world where somebody's like very into like, I want to role play this game and I want to not be a hero and just whatever happens happens. Of course, you still are ultimately hero of the game, but I should say, I understand why someone would like the idea, but just like it's realistic. Whatever happens to you happens. There is
Hmm.
a fun in that, especially I imagine like if you were streaming it with like a group of chat watching, having fun with it, sure, and you're just gonna make it work. However, but for me, trying to be like, I just want to get to the next game at this point. I'm 30 hours in this godforsaken game. I did finish it, but
You did.
yeah, I did finish it because I was so interested to know about the end, and like there is a charm to it. It's just like sometimes the more distance you get from a game, the more you can see how you feel about it in the like big picture of all the other games you played, and that's affected my top 10 list even. Where there are games like while I was playing them where I might be like, this is it, this is my goatee.
Hmm.
Uh, I'll tell you when we get to some of the games. I could probably tell you about 5 games on my list, but then you take a step back and you're like, what was the impact on me now? Like, how do I look back and feel about it? And I think that's something this lands. And that's Dragon's Dogma just kind of like kept falling down my list for one reason or another because of those things in relation to other things I played. Where I was like, was I having fun actually? And the answer is yes, but like only barely.
Yeah. That's a lot of mechanics going on. I was pulling up footage of it or gameplay while you were going through, and it looked pretty decent.
Yeah, it looks good. It's just and the combat is fun, but it's not like dodge. Like there's a character who has a dodge. It's like an assassin or something, I think. But it doesn't have the full repertoire of like action uh, RPG sort of moves and things in your tool belt that you would expect. Instead, it's like a little more of a mix of sort of like kind of like one of those real time games. I mean, not to say you don't control the character, but you're kind of like picking moves, executing them as needed. It's more about like your positioning and relativity to the monsters to make sure you can't get hit and
Hmm.
using spells and stuff. But it's fun. The combat is fun. It's just no part of it. It's like a 10 out of 10 for me. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
even the parts I love are still like 8 out of
Which is not bad, to be clear, but
10. Mm.
it's interesting that the game that
Those
you ended up liking least is one that you finished.
and liked. I mean because
I
I don't even
guess,
think I
okay.
put games I didn't finish. I probably didn't even include them on my list of things I would think about. Like I don't remember if I started and quit a game this year, but I think the reason I put on disappointment though is like I actually thought from what I had seen from one, this was so similar to one when I actually expected, oh, one has a lot of good bones here. I'm excited to see how they build on it like they did in Resident Evil.
Hmm.
And there was building, but not they weren't what I would have done to fix the game or make it better. So
All right. I'll skip that one.
all right. Disappointment.
So this is going to be controversial, both by the rules
Elden Ring.
and by anyone who might be watching. Um,
You still gotta tell me because I can't see.
Grand Theft Auto 5. Still
You
didn't
played
play it.
Grand Theft Auto 5 this year?
No, that's the problem.
Oh.
Still didn't play it. I bought the game when it came out. Um, I've never finished a Grand Theft Auto.
Yep.
I don't know that I've ever made it halfway through a Grand Theft Auto. And I continue to buy every new Grand Theft Auto. And I don't know why. So this is a disappointment to me, not because I picked it up again this year, but because I, like everyone else, and probably more so because of everyone else, am looking forward to Grand Theft Auto 6. I'm sure I'll get it just like everybody else will. and I'm pretty sure I won't finish it, just like I always do. Um, but I kind of want to train myself into just finishing these kinds of games,
Yeah.
and in knowing that 6 is coming up, and I made it a little the ways through 5, I I don't know. I wish I had more interest in it. Like, so I don't think we've got
Yeah.
on our list necessarily. We might come back for it, but like what we're most looking forward to for this year, or I guess what next year, this year. And for me, that game isn't Grand Theft Auto 6, um,
Sure.
but it's if there's a difference in most anticipated and most looking forward to, like it's the one I'm most anticipating, but not the one I'm most looking forward to.
I get it.
So yeah, so for me, it's getting this close to where we're talking about 6 more and more, and hearing everybody else bring it up. Just listening the other day, it's what is it? They're gonna expecting to make like $3 billion in profit the first year alone, or something like that.
I mean, I think it will be the thing about that that's so different. It'll be the biggest video game of all time by
Yeah,
far.
bigger than
Uh,
even the biggest movie of all time, I think, is what they were
yeah.
saying on Kind of Funny.
Well, games make so much money when they make money, and the thing about it is, since the last Grand Theft Auto, there's now the whole online thing, which didn't exist
Hmm.
when 5 first launched, and now that's why they've been able to sustain and go over a decade without a new game, or at least without a new Theft Auto game. Um, Red Dead, obviously, they did whatever that was, like 5 years ago. Um, I It's also probably my most anticipated game. I
Hmm.
think, though, I would say it's another one where you could mainline it because it's going to have the same problems we already talked about with open world games. We need to go back around on it, but like the stories in those games are actually better than you would expect, right? Because they seem silly on the surface, but ultimately, like especially what 5 does at school is there's 3 protagonists, and you play as all of them. Like it rotates around the story, and the way the stories intersect and what that means and choices you make, are all really cool. And so it definitely holds up, especially because it's been remade or polished or re-released and
Right.
updated so much over time anyway that the game that exists now I'm sure is so much better than the one I played on PlayStation 3, which is crazy to think it's on its third console right now. That's how old it is.
Well, I started to
So,
say when I bought 5, but I thought like, no, that can't be right. Like I'm pretty sure it was it on PlayStation 4. Yeah.
yeah, it was on
I'm
PlayStation
pretty
3,
sure I bought
I think.
the PlayStation 4 when I lived in Florida
Yeah,
that day. Bought PlayStation, Grand Theft Auto 4, Grand Theft Auto 5. Like came home with it. Like that was my purchase day game.
yeah,
And it's
that's
so
crazy.
weird because it's like universally everyone's maybe not favorite game, but everyone loves it. Everyone's going to play it. Everyone looks forward to playing it. And I keep on wanting to want all that, but then don't.
Yeah,
So I'll try 6. We'll see. Maybe 6 will be at a different end of this list next time. Um,
I also think like you're coming at games from a different perspective than you were then. Like we've as a group, like we weren't gamers, before. And now we play more games, we know more games, we might see more of what they have to
well,
offer.
yeah, but we're also like we were willing to commit like 8 hours to a raid that we would ultimately fail in Destiny then versus now we got very
Yeah,
small targeted chunks.
that's true. That is true. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with 6. I don't think it'll be a disappointment, right? Like they have enough pedigree Rockstar does between essentially they make 2 games now and everyone loves everyone they make, right? Like Grand Theft Auto 3 on, they haven't missed. So from a public perspective, and
Right.
I mean I agree with that. I love them all, but you had Grand Theft Auto 3. I want to say maybe you had Red Dead, or
Red
you had
Dead.
4 and then Red Dead, and then you had 5 and you had Red Dead 2. And the at least Grand Theft Auto 5 and Red Dead are Game of the Year contenders. Um,
Yeah.
for like big outlets, not me. Um,
I'd actually forgotten
and
that, but Red Dead 2 was another victim of the open worldness.
well, sure,
And to
I
be
mean it's the
clear,
exact same.
if 6 is on my list as a disappointment next year, it's not going to be for the game itself. It's going to be disappointed that I still didn't get into it because I want
Get to
to.
it, yeah, yeah, cool. All right, well, that's time to make the positive switch to the games we wish we had played this year. Which my list. I can shrink mine. I finished one. Um, I I think we can like fly through these because we're not going to have anything to say because we haven't played them. I might be able to tell you what it is I'm interested in about them, and I assume I have more than you.
Do you actually have 10? I mean, I do have
No,
5.
no, I don't have
So
10. I have uh, like 5.5, and I'll explain the half when we get there.
okay,
Oh,
you
it's not
wanna?
really ranked either. I know I put numbers here, but I'm just going to tell you the games I wish I could play. How am I going to rank a game I don't know about?
Well, I was just going through. I think I can rank mine. So
Do it then, but mine won't be because I don't know enough about them.
okay,
Uh, well, I have one extra, so I'm happy to go first.
yeah,
But I'm
sure.
actually going to start with a big one. I saw this on a lot of people's game of the year list. There was a game called UFO 50. Have you heard about this game at all? It might be one worth sharing a trailer for, but essentially it's meant to be like a nod to um, specifically like the NES era of games. And so the idea is like you're following through the history of a fake game company by playing 50 individual games inside their game that this fake game company released. And my understanding is like they came out chronologically, but you have access to all or most of them. And one might be like an RPG, one might be like a sports game, one might be like like a there's one I've heard about this like house party you got to deal with. So you can see here kind of the setup. One might be like a Mario, like platformer type, a shooter. They're all different with their own mechanics that um, I've heard like each game is actually so well made that like it stands on its own, and the way they tie together are cool. And it's interesting to see like the way the language of the developer like translates into all these games. Like, and I guess people were saying like, now this is the part where it might get dangerous for you. There are things you can do in each one to take them from like a gold finish to a cherry finish, like because you did enough of tasks or scores or whatever it might
Oh
be
gosh, yeah.
to complete them. But a lot of people also said because of the way the story is done or the way you can approach the games, it doesn't feel like you need to go through and actually even play all 50. Like try them out, pop them out, play the ones you like, and they will connect with you because they're all actually so interestingly designed. Like it doesn't feel like people like half-assed 50 games. Like it feels like there are 50 good Nintendo games in here. And I'm like, that's just from like a simple I mean, you're seeing like how different all of these are. There's old school first person like uh like dungeon crawlers, there are Street Fighter games, there are brawlers, there's puzzle games, there's whatever. So anyway, I'm pretty excited. This is the party planner one. Oh, for a second there, that I'd heard a lot of people talk about as the best game in it. So a lot of people have takes like, what's the best game? What are the strategies for these games? And I just think that's pretty cool. So that's one I'll probably check out at some point, just because it seems pretty unique.
Different, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. What is yours? And I can hear you because you're coming out of my speaker. So I want you to tell me, but hit my BRB because I'm gonna stream right next to myself.
All right.
But
Let
I
me
can hear you, so I want to
find.
hear what your number five to listen to is. Let me back
All
away.
right.
Don't look at my butt. Don't look at my butt.
So for me, my number 5, I'll go ahead and put this one at number 5. Um, it's Cyberpunk. This is at number 5 rather than number 4. Again, obviously it didn't come out last year in 2024, but for me, this was another reset of, all right, I didn't finish GTA 5. I didn't finish Red Dead 2. Here we go again. And I love the cyberpunk theme. I love all that stuff. Just futuristic, techno, whatever. Like I like that. So
Yeah,
that was my way to get back into it, get the momentum, kind of get into that game again. And I actually decided I was going to play this game on hard, which I don't normally do because I like to just follow stories. I decided I was going to play this game on mouse and keyboard because I just built fancy new computer. We can play this fancy new game and it'll look amazing.
yeah.
And I don't know what it was. I don't think it was just the game itself. I think maybe something else came up that kind of got in the way of me playing it, but I didn't go back to it. I know
I
I was real
remember.
excited. The three of us
I
started
feel like early
together.
on it was very buggy. Not as much on PC.
Right.
By the way, you
Yeah.
can take away.
Yeah. Okay. Um,
um,
yeah. Brandon
so I
dealt
think
with
there
a
was
lot of
that.
that.
Yeah, our buddy had it on PlayStation. That was obviously like fully broken at the time. So I think we all ended up like disjointed, and that probably led to a lack of enthusiasm. Also, maybe I
Yeah,
don't know,
I know
but
getting started, I was real excited to play another game at the same time because it never really works out that I'm playing a new game on launch day kind of a thing, especially
right,
not the three of us playing the same new game on launch day.
yeah,
So Brandon dealing with that was a little bit of a pain, but I mean, I kept going. It was a bummer because he wasn't an active part of the conversation for a little bit.
hmm
Um, Obviously this year you said you wanted to use that to kind of get back into your GPU upgrade. The
yeah.
DLC came out, so I added that to mine. So I'm looking forward. Probably once I finish the game that I'm playing on PS5 right now, I will make that my just on the side game and try to kind of keep up with you. I mean, you play a lot quicker than I do, so at least for a
Yeah, but I
little
imagine
bit.
it'll be a game I keep pace with you on purpose in tandem with
Mm.
another game probably is how so
Um, Yeah, so I wish I'd played that last year. This one and number four have been on my backlog since I bought them. I've been real excited about both of them, and I've not finished either of them to the point of now I have to restart them. But whenever I talk about things that I wish I had played, it's not the new games that I missed. It's these two that have been on my backlog for years now that aren't going anywhere. I just, I'm also not playing them.
yeah, I got you. I also have a backlog of games. I mean, I kept this for just my own purposes. It's like 2024 games, but I have like a list going in backlogged of like games I want to play, and some of the games on there are so old, you know. So like I'm scrolling through here, I have Final Fantasy 8 on here. You know what I mean? Not to say I obviously added it in like 1999 or whatever, but like there are games on here that just like I want to get back to that came out a while ago. East 9, that game is probably 4 or 5 years old now. Resident Evil 5. So I'm in a similar boat as you of just like the backlog keeps growing. But my next game that I wish I had played, or that I wish I had at least gotten to this year, is I'm going to try to make them, I think, maybe less exciting as I go, or like more exciting as I go. So, not to say this isn't what I'm excited about,
Right,
but
yeah. So
there's a
you
game
don't have
called
these ranked necessarily. You're just,
I'm kind of doing it on the fly now
okay.
for like just for fun, but you can put them in as such. But this one is called Animal Well. I don't know if you've heard of this game.
No.
It's like a
You have
platformer. I don't think you would
exposure
call it a
to a
Metroid.
whole nother stratosphere of games than I do.
Dude, I listen to a lot of game podcasts. Um, Animal Well is like a platformer. I'm not going to call it a Metroidvania simply because I actually don't know the mechanics well enough. But my understanding is, if you look at the art of it, it's like very minimalist. It's like a solid black background, sort of really bright neon colors, and like you might be talking about like 40 total pixels to create like what the character looks like, and you move around in this environment, and um, you're not even sure what you're supposed to be doing. There's no directional like instructions. It's just like go explore this map, and you kind of like are like, oh, is that a treasure? Did I earn something? Am I fighting? What am I trying to do? And my understanding, I haven't played it, is like that slowly like reveals itself to you and builds and grows in ways that you can't even expect. And people are purposefully, they're putting this on their top 10 list this year, but they won't tell you what is so cool about it because they don't want to ruin it for you. You know what I mean? So like
Mm,
my understanding is just like the way the game unfolds and the developers kind of communicate to you what you're supposed to do and what you discover, is all apparently quite satisfying. And I enjoy games like that. It's shorter. I think you can beat it in under 10 hours. So um,
nice.
I'm interested in checking that one out just because it's so different. And that might be one to scratch the itch of like sort of puzzle outside like hard combat because it's not really a combat focused game. Again, is my understanding. So I think that's how I'll treat it. That could be a good one to go alongside a cyberpunk, like a shorter puzzle,
Yeah.
simple game along a big RPG or something. So
Okay.
that's Animal Will.
I respect the names on a lot of your list, if nothing else.
Yeah.
All right. So the other one for me has been on my backlog for a long time. Death Stranding. Um,
Yeah, I know how you feel about that. You've played it, but you just haven't finished it.
I don't know how much of it I've played. Enough that I know that I liked it a lot, and also enough that I know I've got like 70 more hours to go or something like that.
I was just gonna say, just in these two games, if you were to start them over, you have like 300 hours of gaming
Yes,
sitting here.
yeah. Well, and that's part of the problem. Death Stranding, I also got near the same time as Cyberpunk. I think right around when it came out, and so I was trying to play that one mouse and keyboard also. So I won't do that the next time. It was very tricky. I know like you have to whenever you get real quiet, you have to hit like control or alt or something. You got to hit something with your pinky and then move real delicately that I'm not good at reaching some of those further keys. But I mean, I tried to sell you on I guess I did sell you on it, but you hated it. Which is a
I
bummer.
didn't like the walking sim. It's one of the most divisive games, but I will say to you, it's a Kojima PlayStation exclusive. So whether it's on PS Plus or whatever, or you use controller on PC, that might be something to consider because it was
I
made
will
to be played with.
absolutely, yeah, I will play it
Yeah,
with controller next time. I know there's
yeah,
a second one coming out, so we'll see if I make it. If I don't get to it, then I'll just put two at the very top of my list.
yeah.
But it was, aside from the moments that were very stressful, it was largely so peaceful. And the music that they played as like they kind of zoom out and you're walking across the terrain is, I loved it. So
I could
I
certainly
very
see that.
much want to get back to that one.
I get that for sure. All right. My next game, I'm just going to talk about super quick, mostly because I think I've actually told you about it, but also like I want to have you look this up because I am most convinced it's a game that the fewest people will know about that we discuss in this entire episode, which is a game called Alaloth, Alaloth.
Sounds like a
There's a
Pokemon.
subtitle on it, Alaloth, Champions of the Four Kingdoms.
Okay.
Um, what I find so intriguing about this, and I know you're pulling up the trailer or whatever, or a let's play or whatever works, but what I find so interesting about this is we had talked earlier about Baldur's Gate, which is a CRPG, they would call it, right? It's like an isometric view you control. It's a tactics game. Ultimately, you have ability points and you can only move so far. I like that style of game in terms of the way you run around and talk to people and do things. But I don't love necessarily the combat, or at least I think it'd be cool to have a version of that where that combat isn't necessarily the way you play it. So that's how I should phrase it. I like strategy games and tactics games, but I think it would be cool to have a CRPG where that's not the combat. That's the case for this. It's meant to be kind of a love letter to like those 90s looking CRPGs in this view, but the combat is a Souls like. So it's a Baldur's Gate esque talk to people, explore, find things with Dark Souls style combat, which for me is a marriage made in heaven for anything. If you tell me it's this genre, but we added this combat, I'm probably going to try it.
Yeah, it's a pretty good
Um,
start. It's
so,
like with the you ever have a game where that game is the reason you hold a controller the way you do? Like Dark Souls
mhm.
combat is the reason that you hold a controller the way you do.
Yep, you're seeing some of the combat now finally.
Yeah.
But um, yeah, definitely. And I think also like it's made by a small team, so I don't expect the level of polish of some of those games. And I have seen some of the reviews say like that's if anything holds it back, it's that. But nevertheless, like I've already bought it. I want to support somebody trying something like this, especially a small team or a person or whatever it might be. This is definitely one coming up for me soon. It is a Steam Deck verified, so it plays well on the Steam Deck, which is another way I'll be able to play a game like this more reliably. Anyway, I could see myself playing this in bed or on the couch or whatever, just to get more hours in. Because I do think it's longer. It's not Baldur's Gate long, but I think it might be like a 30 or 40 hour game that I
Oh.
could chip away at over time on the Steam Deck because it just has less demand.
At some point, I think I would benefit from just, I guess, another of these just chatting sessions of not me going and looking up definitions, but you like explaining all these different acronymed games.
What did I say?
Because, well, you know, you just said CRPG. Like, it's not like they're
Oh,
things that aren't real, but at no point in my gaming history, like RPG aside, did the type of game really get attached to it until here recently. And so a lot of people will say things like that and it doesn't really mean anything to me, or I have to go look it up. Like
yeah,
whatever the style is, it's like MMORPG or whatever. Like no
massive
idea.
multiplayer online. Yeah.
Yeah.
That one's unnecessarily long. I think you could just say like multiplayer RPG or multiplayer online. But I guess like they say massive because it's like you're all in the, it's not just like multiplayer in the sense four people can go play together. It's like people are all over the towns like a Destiny,
Yeah.
right? Like there are people you don't know online with you. Um, CRPG, just in case you didn't know, is computer
I
RPG. It's like the
no, I
old
didn't
school
know.
click and do.
Oh, okay.
ARPG is action RPG. That's what Dark Souls is at its core. Now that's obviously being redefined as a Souls-like, and you can have an action RPG that is not. That'd be like a Nier Automata, right? Like where
Mm,
you're.
big fan.
Uh, although the other thing about Nier is it falls potentially into another category, which is JRPG, which is Japanese RPG, which is of a certain style. Nier is like on the fringe of that. I don't know if I'd fully call it a JRPG, but like a Persona or like a Dragon Quest, those are JRPGs. Like that, you can just tell the Japanese influence on those games.
Okay.
All right, what do you got?
My next one, let's see, number one is a sure thing. I'll go ahead and put this one at number 3. Black Myth Wukong.
Hmm,
Again,
good game.
I was about to buy it, and then I went the Ghost of Tsushima route, and I don't necessarily regret that because that was fun, kind of being in the PlayStation state of mind for PS5 Pro pre-orders and stuff like that.
Hmm.
You've been pushing this game real hard lately. I want to play it. I don't know if I will play it, but it's one that I think I would have liked. Um, Outside of the game,
I,
also, I feel like I've heard a lot of conversation about the game itself and its making and the devs, how much they care about it. Like all of that stuff is also very cool and makes
yeah,
me even more interested. Not that devs don't always care about their games, but like it's
no,
pretty
I
uncommon that we get like a like what's their deal? Like it's a Chinese centric like there's something about that origin, that whatever tradition in a game that we don't see very often.
yeah,
Um, which I mean, I
sure,
barely remembered enough to even say that accurately, but the fact that it's
yep,
there, it's pretty cool. So
yep. I
that's
won't
just a
comment because
genuine wish I would have
spoilers, but
played.
I was gonna say spoilers. I'll get to talk about that later. That one will make my top 10. My next one, it's gonna be really quick. Actually, there's a game. I'm gonna end up with 6, by the way. Uh, this one is called 1000 X. So 1000 X Resist. This one might also be a good one to share a trailer for, but um, apparently it's like a pretty. It's like got old school graphics, maybe like PlayStation 1 or 2 era, if I'm remembering correctly, or either that or it's just sort of like minimalist cell shaded. But it's very like cinematic, story focused. Apparently, it wrestles with some really interesting concepts, and just is like a very good
Ooh,
um,
I like this
story
art.
based game. Kind of in a cool, yeah, cool art style, cool era. It's a 4.4 on backlog. People love it. I mean, that's a really high score.
Out of
Its
5, I guess.
majority of scores are 5-star reviews. And apparently, the story it tells and is dealing with is just very interesting. And like, I've heard people say like only do it if you play it with other people or have a community you can go talk to about it after because you're going to want to talk about it to like everyone. So I'm pretty interested in trying it. I think the setting is so unique. I've just heard it's been top 5 on a lot of lists of folks that I respect and trust, and I hadn't even heard of it until Goaty season, and now I'm seeing it pop up everywhere. So I think this is one I'll be checking out. I think it's a 15-hour game, so it's longer but not crazy long. And actually, is that even true? Hold on. Resist playtime.
I've at multiple
11
points,
hours.
that's not
So
bad at all. At
yeah.
multiple points in the 40 seconds that I've been watching this, have thought that the graphics looked like Ocarina of Time and Breath of the Wild, which
Yeah,
is a
which
weird
is
thing
cool.
to
And the
say.
cell shade is that for sure. And just the choices look cool. The concepts, I'm definitely interested. So this is one I'll be doing.
Cool. I like sci-fi. Usually we see things about All Mother. It's
I was gonna say
interesting.
you like like sort of like cyberpunky type
Right,
stuff.
like
So
AI type.
yeah.
It's funny how
So
interested
one to
I
think
am
about.
in AI in games and disinterested in AI in real life.
Exactly. Well, if I put 11 hours in and I really do need to talk to someone about it, like they say, then I'll come being like, dude, just play it.
All right. You said you're gonna have 6. By way of having 5.5, you already had 6. So do I need to prepare for a
No,
number
five and a
7?
half is that's the one. So I'll tell you what my half is. It's Helldivers 2. I'm just gonna tell you that now. We just started me, you, and Brandon all plan to play it, but technically we haven't really yet. That's when I wish I'd gotten to. I know it's like everyone's favorite multiplayer game this year. I had fun a little bit in the first one when we tried it, but like it definitely felt dated and weird in the new like 3D perspective what they're trying to do. And I've heard it's one of those things where just like going out on the quick missions, like I think it takes like 5 minutes to complete like a mission or run or whatever, and you just come back with funny stories, crazy shit happens, you get crushed by your own loot, a bug eats you, whatever it is, and I'm like excited to see what kind of stories and stuff and fun we have playing that one. So I don't
I'm
know if it'll
glad we
make it
are
to our
playing
streams
it.
or not,
Yeah.
but I'm excited to see. Yeah,
I kind of was afraid that I'd miss the boat because you heard a lot of people talk about it for a long time, and then I think they just kind of stopped. And
it just
I
happens.
still
Next
don't
thing,
remember that first one at all. You and Brandon both said we definitely played it. I don't remember anything about it.
I mean, we played it maybe 2 sessions. That makes sense, but
All right.
you're up.
So you've just got one more left, right?
One more left.
Okay. So my next one um is Metaphor.
Yeah, dude.
And I would never play this game because it's too long. Probably that's the only reason. It's too long. But the amount of good things that I've heard about the story, like I love a good story. You touched on it earlier. A lot of times you get stories out of games that you don't get other places you might go for them. And I know the story here. Listening to a kind of funny gamescast, I think, listening to each of them talk about their experience with this game and like what it spoke and what it spoke to them, it was
Yep.
pretty powerful, even just hearing them talk about what it meant to them. And so
Yeah.
I I I like that a lot. I know that I would never finish it. So I'm not gonna
And to be
start it,
clear
but
for the viewers, you've never played a Persona game, which
no.
is the company who made this, so it would be fully new
Yeah,
if you
and I
did.
think listening to you talk about whatever the last one was, Persona 5, I mean,
Yeah.
you talked about it this year, which is like it's stretching into like its third year of you playing it or something like that. It's crazy.
Well, I had. I mean, I'm done. I'm done now because I'm playing Metaphor. But Persona 5 took me. I started it before the pandemic, and I finished it the year of or the year after the pandemic. Now, obviously, I wasn't continually playing it. Like, it's a game that
Right,
maybe I'd
yeah.
stop for 6 months at a time, but it does have a really good like tell me where I'm at in the story kind of button, which is a good way to catch back up. And the mechanics are good but simple enough to keep going. Because you could treat it like it's so long. The way I literally talked myself back into playing it was like a TV show where I was like, I've watched 15 hours of a TV show, taken a year off, and come back. Like I can do that with this game. And I kept doing it, and finally, including replaying like maybe 30 hours of it because I had played Persona 5 and then Persona 5 Royal came out, which is sort of like a redone, revamped, fix every problem kind of game where I was like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do that version. Plus, I had a whole extra story added. Um, and dude, I'm glad I cracked at it because I think I've told you it probably now lands in my top 10 all time games. So, uh, yeah, I get it with Metaphor. We may or may not talk about that one later. I don't know yet.
Still stewing.
My last
When you
one. Oh,
inevitably
sorry.
do finish it, no, I was gonna say I do want to revisit because I actually listened to that podcast I talked about. I listened to it twice, not on purpose, but both times it hits
I was
the
about to say
same
that's
way as
powerful
far as
on the
like,
back.
yeah, how much it meant. So once you do finish, I'm very curious to kind of get your review of it and kind of talk through
Yeah,
what the
for sure,
story meant for you and kind of stuff like that.
for sure. Um, my last one again. I think you'll probably want to Google for the art style, but this one is probably the game I most wanted to play next to the point where it is the game I'm playing next. I just finished a game today, and I will be playing Nine Souls next. Nine space SOLS. Um,
I think
I'll
this is
have
on
you
my
peek.
Steam list because of you.
Yeah, I'll have you peek at the art for this because I'm interested to see what you think. But this game is essentially, as it's been described to me and from what I've read, like a action platformer slash Metroidvania, but with the combat style of a Sekiro game. So meaning you have attacks and dodges, but also there's a big parry mechanic where that's kind of how you wear down the bosses and stuff.
Mm.
Extremely tight combat, cool stories. The art style is like incredible. The way they uh like the character. So I actually started playing this the day that my wife went to labor with our second kid. And that's actually what stopped me. So I played like maybe like 20 minutes. The combat felt tight. Those stamina bars and health bars were so interesting to try to manage with the enemies. The boss fights are tight. It's everything you and I like in games. As you can see, it's like a sort of Japanese, or I actually don't know if it's Japanese or Chinese. I think Japanese though. sort of culturally based.
A journey of
Um,
Asian fantasy, it says.
yeah, that's not exactly clarifying to my particular question, I guess technically, but the uh, the platforming looks cool. Everything just felt so tight about it that I know I'll go back and then I like it, and it falls down. I mean, I know you can tell just by looking at it. This is our. It's like even got the sci-fi touch of like everything we kind of enjoy, kind of wrapped up in a game, like Souls, like Metroid action platform with tight combat. That's like Japanese culture meets sci-fi. I'm like, just take my money. So I'll
Yeah,
be doing
and
that
I
one.
see here inspired by you said Sekiro, then Hollow Knight, Katana Zero. I played that one
Yep.
on Switch. All obviously Hollow Knight. It also kind of looked like a little bit of Celeste and the
Yep.
Mamadors, like all of that stuff bundled with just a unique art style. It's pretty hard to go wrong. That says
Yep.
PS5 and
Exactly.
PS4. Maybe I don't have it on my Steam list, but I've absolutely watched that video
You
before
know,
because
it's
you've
on
seen
Steam
it.
as well.
Okay.
It's on Steam. Yeah.
All right.
Um, do we're at Goaty, right? Or do you have one more?
No, I've got my actual most wish
Yeah.
I'd played. And I will play, but not until something else happens.
Okay.
And that is Tears of the Kingdom.
Yes. Wait, what
Um,
has to happen for it to happen? I don't know if I know what this is.
Switch to. I'm not going to get.
Oh, Switch.
I mean, at
Okay.
this point, it's probably not a thing that would benefit from Switch 2, but I played the Switch like maybe not at all for a year straight. And so my
The,
nephew left his on
it's
a.
starting to show its age for sure. Like the performance is just such a drop that you're.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Um, I ended up giving mine to my nephew because his fell off
Oh,
his
I
car.
forgot. So you literally can't play
Yeah.
it.
It didn't fall off his car. It fell off the roof of his mother's car. And shame on him. I had one
Yeah.
sitting there collecting dust, so you can have mine. But yeah, I kept saying I was going to play this game, expecting it was going to be the launch title for the new Switch. But I think I asked if the Switch 2 was coming out for like 2 years in a row, and the answer kept being no. So I kept not playing it. But I will
Yep.
play that whenever I get a Switch 2. That'll probably be the first game that I do play, unless there's a different Zelda launched with it.
That makes sense to me. Well, let's just do it, man. Why don't you go immediately into your number 10 or 5? Or no, you have fewer games. I got to go first. I forgot.
Yeah.
We said we're going to go. You're going to go 1. I'm going to do, or I'm sorry, you're going to do 5 and then, or 4. And I'll do like some combination of 10, 9, maybe 10, 9, 8 at first. And we'll
Which
alternate
way
that way, maybe.
has you finishing on 1? Is it?
Well, even if we need to
It's
change it
me doing
midway, we can
5,
do it.
right?
I'll do 2 at a time until I need to do an extra one, or we can mix it up that way.
Well, you have 10.
I have 10. Oh, I got more. I've been doing my top 10 though.
Okay, so if I start with 5 and then you do 10, 9, I think that means you do 1 last, which kind of gives you the
Okay, I
weight
didn't
that I
realize you
was
had
mentioning.
I thought you only had 4 games.
Oh, that's right. All right, well, you
So I'll
do
go
10,
first.
9, and then I'll do 4.
Yeah, that's what we'll do. Okay. And if we see ourselves off somehow, we'll just change it.
Yeah.
So I will quickly say, before I tell you what my number 10 game is, there are 3 other games that I have swapped in and out around this spot all day. So I'm going to mention all 3. My 3 runners up that did not ultimately make my top 10 were Neva, which is like that cool from the makers of Grease, Gris, like maybe 5+ years ago. It was like a very pretty puzzle game. Neva is their new game of that, which is better in every way. The last one wasn't combat focused. This one is not focused, but like it has combat. Um, the art style is just as good, if not prettier. And the best part, you have like a dog companion. Love Neva. It's
Big
like
fan.
short 4 hours, kind of puzzles meet action, meet solve how to navigate this action platform map. The other one, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. I loved it. I think it's like an incredibly good Metroidvania, and it didn't even make my top 10. That's how good of a year it was. I think you'd love Prince of Persia: Lost Crown, and I hope you play it at some point because you like Metroidvanias. It's like a Prince of Persia Hollow Knight, and I'm not. That's not an exaggeration. It's like it is that good. It's just like I had some issues with it. Parts I got stuck on. Some of the stuff like that I probably would have enjoyed at a time that I did give Hollow Knight the time for. I can't do now. Like some of the secrets and things you can get to unlock if you're willing to do like really hard platforming sections. I wasn't. I was just like, I'm enjoying the game. I just want to finish it, and I'm sure a lot of those things would have unlocked more for it than it ultimately. And then the last one that didn't make the cut was Silent Hill 2. I liked it while I was playing it. I've recommended you play it. I still think you should play it. it's just as good of a remake as the entire Resident Evil series has been doing. I don't have the affinity for Silent Hill though. I've never played them before, so it doesn't kind of give me the same nostalgia. And I think probably the worst part about it is that um, there's only like 3 or 4 total enemy types,
Mm.
um, and that kind of felt limiting to me. And I also just felt like the sort of puzzle action, whatever, like repetition of the game went on a little longer than I would have preferred. I think it could have been a 10-hour game, and I think it took me 20, 25 hours. Like I feel like I would have enjoyed a shorter, tighter experience. The one thing I did mean to tell you about that I think you'd like though, at least if you're on PlayStation. I'm sure if you play it regularly, it just comes out of your normal speakers. But what I really did appreciate about this game is, even though, as you know, I love horror, I do not love jump scares. That's not my jam. Like, I don't want something popping out at me. And what I did like about this game is when you're walking around these like empty hotel corridors or whatever, if you get close to a zombie, this weird like radio staticky sound starts playing in your controller. So while it's not jumping out at you, or it still ultimately does jump out at you, they give you like a little bit of warning, so you at least like feel the tension of that. I was like, I like that design. That's a really cool design in a horror game. One that I almost wish you could turn on or off because I could see some people wanting to be jump scared, but I didn't, and ultimately love that feature because if a game's just jump scaring me constantly, I wouldn't play it anymore. I'd be like, I'm done. You know?
Yeah, it's funny that that kind of puts you at ease because I could see where that creates its own kind of anxiety. If
It
you know
it
that you're
does,
near,
but
but
I
you're
would
not
rather
seeing it.
trade for those anxieties, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'd rather have the warning in the build rather than the ultimate, like, bam, punch in the face payoff. Because it's it's not like that thing where you're like, you warn someone you're gonna punch them in the face and give them 5 seconds and then do it. Like, that's worse, of course, than just probably randomly getting punched in the face. But I would argue that if you can brace for it, like, if it's abs, I can tighten them
Yeah,
first, it's
yeah,
more like
that's
that,
fair.
you know?
Yeah, that's fair.
So, those are 3 I just wanted to run through, and really quickly, this worked out well anyway because we can speed through it. But my number 10 game is Mamadora Moonlit Farewell. That one did slip into my top 10. We don't need to go over it anymore. It's sort of by the same people who made the one you mentioned, Noria. It's the 5th, I think, game in the Mamadora series and the last one, hence the name. Very cool, cute, pixelated art style with, despite how the game looks, it's tough as nails compared to the like cute art style it has, but still kind of felt like a nice build on everything we loved about um, Reverie in the Moonlight. Although I would argue that you and I, even one of those things we appreciated about it was its brevity in the prior game, and
Hmm.
just making it longer and bigger isn't always necessarily better. I don't know if I would say I actually like it more, but that might also be one of those things where like I discovered it through that other one, so I just hold a certain affinity for it just because it's where I found it. But love Mamadora. I know they're a little bit under appreciated or like not even well known. So hopefully, um, if someone
That's
happens to be
definitely a
listening,
series that more people should play. It's so
yeah,
much fun.
exactly. So that's my number 10. And I think I'll stop there because I did a bunch. So I'll still let you go and I'll do another run of like maybe 2 games.
Well, this can be quick. Um, my list is 4 because I didn't play a lot of games that came out in 2025.
Yeah.
2024.
Next year, new
Yeah.
goals to have at least 10 games plugged into your list.
Yeah. So for me, this is also Mamador.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah.
fun game. Can't go wrong with it. More of the same from what we've already played. It's just, it is still what it is. It's nothing more than like a sweet little cutesy game to play. It's not,
Yeah.
blowing you out of your seat or anything. It's just very good at what it is.
And I would say just like good quality the whole way. Like that's what's nice about it. Is like the bosses are good. The characters are interesting. Like you
It is
said, like
very balanced,
somehow,
like in that way.
yeah. And somehow, like you said, even though these characters are not super detailed, they get them to express a lot of emotion. The way they handle text and
Yeah.
everything, it's just well done. It's well produced. It's done by a very small team, if not, I think like one guy is the creator at least. But um, cool series.
There's something to be said for the map being so small that you go to a place and you quickly find out you shouldn't be there. You
Yeah.
like I think there's one area in particular you go to and you're like, I don't have double jump. I'm not supposed to be here. And so you just
Yeah.
get out and go to the other place and you carry on. You're not kicking rocks in some direction that you don't know until you give up. Like it's very clear you're not supposed to be here yet. Let's just go the other direction and I can carry on. Like it's quick in that way, I guess. It's not
Yeah.
always about how big can I make this map, how complicated. Like it's big enough for the story it's telling and that's all. I like that.
Yep. I love that as well. All right, my number 9 game is going to be a game that would probably end up in your graveyard of open world games. But I do remember telling you to play it simply because I know you have like a love, um, or at least we all had an interest. I think especially after Shogun, in the interest of like Japanese culture, specifically in this era. And I think that marriage was nice watching Shogun and playing this game. But now my number 9 game is Rise of the Ronin, Ronin. I don't know how much you remember about this, but it's an open world. I'd actually still say Souls like, but of from the people who made Neo.
Yeah.
So still very like combat focused, not as much like into the stances and things as those games,
Yeah.
although I do
I'm
believe it had.
traumatized.
But it was more I think friendly than Neo for sure, like not as difficult by any means. The open world was great to the point where like I platinumed the first of the 3 areas the game is in. You sort of go from one area to the next that are all open when you're there. I got everything on the map. I want to do everything with it. However, my version of what happens to you with open world games is instead of quitting, I like just narrow down by the end. So it was one of those things where I did all of the first area, and then when I saw how big the next area was, I was just like, "This is unsustainable. Like this will be the
Hmm.
only game I play this year." So then I sort of always like funnel down to I'll only do the things that give me the armor until probably by the last chapter I'm just mainlining the missions to finish the game because I'm in my 50th hour and I at that point I just always want to play something new. But still to commit to an open world game like that and even have done probably 20 hours on the first island, I mean tells you how much I was truly liking it. The combat feels good. The characters are awesome. The way you can like fight someone but then find out what they mean to you in terms of like your story and they become your friend and then an NPC you can buy things from or whatever. It's just a cool way of kind of unfolding the story, and it's of a similar interesting time in Japanese history, kind of like where the West is also introducing itself. So you have guns and they have certain sentiment toward those people, and it's kind of that it's that really interesting time in history where you sort of feel like that transition from what feels like out of our touch to like into our touch, if that makes sense. Like history versus like kind of more modern history, like industrialization is starting to happen, and you start feeling like history you have more of a connection to. And it's this weird like gray area of that line from like what feels like ancient history to modern history.
Hmm.
Um, is a cool time to play in, which is why I think there's been so many cool pieces of media that came out for that in 2024. Like I don't remember if Blue Eye was late 23 or 24, but between that Shogun and this, I was just like
Yeah.
swimming in cool content
And
from
that
the same
stuff
era.
grabs
So
you and holds on
yeah,
to you.
yeah.
I'm
So
curious your opinion. So you obviously thought enough of this that it's on your list. I'm pretty sure my only exposure to this game is Brandon deciding between it and Ghost of Tsushima. Tsushima. Obviously, he
yeah,
went the Ghost route.
to go back
Having
to though,
played
he had
both,
already played Ghost, but
okay. Do you
yeah, he had
think?
owned Ghost from 2020.
Okay, but he still chose that over this. He didn't also buy this game. Having
Right.
played them both yourself, do you think he made the right choice?
I mean, I haven't played enough of Ghost to know for sure, but the only reason I would say I think so is Rise of the Ronin has a little more, at least from what I had seen of Ghost, a little bit more like demanding combat, which is more my style. Like it has bosses that will kill you 5 times before you can move on, whereas Ghost, like maybe there are scenarios that you'd fail to, but I don't see myself
It's
like banging my head on
yeah, it's
something in
your
that
own
game.
impatience. It's gonna kill you, and that's it.
Exactly. I would imagine Ghost is more, if not a better story, a more artfully told story. Like Rise of the Ronin story didn't blow my socks off,
Hmm.
but it was interesting, and I did pay attention to it. Unlike Neo, which by the like 20% of the Neo, I was smashing the X button because I didn't know
Yeah,
what the hell was happening in the
yeah.
cutscenes anyway. So it's one of those, which I don't mind. I take those games for what they are, but Ronin's story was good.
Okay. You want to go
Oh,
on
you
with
probably want me
me?
to go again, right?
Yeah.
Although there might be some connectivity happening here, but if there is, unless it's immediately next, I don't want to know it. But my next game is might surprise you that's so far down. But when you hear the praise I have for basically everything from this point on, you'll understand why. My number 8 game, I thought could have been my game of the year while I was playing it. I really did, and it ended up at number 8. It's Stellar Blade. There were times I was like, this is the game. Like this is the game of the year for sure. And the main point for that for me is the combat. Like the combat in that game, I can't describe. I tried to describe to my wife, who does not care about this, and I was like, "I know you don't care about this, but just let me go on about this for a second." The feeling when you perfectly time a parry and your controller's like, "Ching!" I'm just like,
Yeah.
"I'm a fucking legend. I'm the
Yeah.
legend." Like it feels so good. and it just feels tight, and I enjoyed trying to figure it out. I loved that game. Um, I think the hits on it that I don't want to spend a lot of time telling you what I didn't like about it, but I kind of want to justify why it's on
It's
8 on my
easier to
list
say
first.
the things you didn't than it is to say the
Yeah,
things you did.
because I loved it on the
Yeah.
whole. Like again, I'm deadly serious. It could have been Goaty. um, every game from now on really could have been. It I did not love I'll start with the obvious one. I don't mind it. It has its place, but I do feel like there is something about the over sexualization that undermined the game. Like I would have played it on launch day if it had looked different based on what I'd heard about it. But it was so hard to be like, there's no way these people who made a game with these people with giant boobs, giant butts, like took the time to and care to really make this really great game. But like for a PlayStation exclusive from a studio that I think it is their first game, it's like incredibly well polished. From your perspective, I don't know what it's like on the Pro, but on my PlayStation, it felt well optimized. I was at 60
Mhm.
FPS. It never lagged, which is really important in a game like this, right? Like no stutters. It is just smooth as butter. But man, I'm just like that's one where I was like, I literally can't play it with my son in the room. But like even my wife, I'm like, I gotta at least change my outfit, but she still looks this way. Like God, like having to worry about those things, which again, I don't actually worry about them, but it just took a
It's
little bit
weird.
out of it.
Yeah.
Next thing, I'm not a huge fan necessarily of skill tree type upgrading, and the way it worked in that game was just not bad, just a little finicky and odd. How you had like things you could plug into yourself, and you had skill trees, and I didn't hate or dislike it. It's just not like my preferred necessarily way of handling upgrades. And then lastly, I'd say like the story is cool. I don't want to go into it because obviously you're still playing it, but what I did not necessarily fully love, with a few exceptions, is like the character development. Like I feel like Eve, even as a main character, is a little bit boring. Like your side characters are kind of whatever. I do think the idea of them, of like your companion being a robot, but that's not like an AI, that it's like real people with like an earpiece in, is kind of cool to have like a
Hmm.
real person to riff off of, but without having them have to like run around with you.
Right.
Um, I did find, or I do remember finding the bot like a little distracting at times. Like I'd finish a fight and turn around and be like right behind me. I'd be like, "Oh shit!" Like where I thought I had to like hit something one more time. It's like
Yeah.
always kind of weirdly almost in your way, but somehow never fully. That was the worst case. Is I'd take like a stray swing at it because I thought it was like one more enemy. Um, but I mean, I'm nitpicking. I honestly think like cool story. I like the hub that you could do side missions to upgrade. I like how that unlocked new vendors and things you could do. Like it's one of those games where it was so good or so close to being really great that it's like I know for sure Stellar Blade 2 has a chance at Game of the Year because I think they're going to learn, you know.
Hmm.
Now I don't think they're going to change the sexualization, but I think
Right.
everything for a first game it's so close that I'm like I can only imagine they're going to like hammer it all out. That's it.
So this game is obviously going to be on my list also. It's not. It's not three. Um, so like, I'm torn with giving my like not necessarily rebuttal, but my direct take to some of the things you pointed out right there now
Yeah.
before I forget versus then. So maybe I'll rebut them now and then I'll say what I like about it when I
Yeah,
put
yeah.
it on mine.
Okay.
So
Yep.
the over sexualization is very real and it's very awkward if there's other people in the room. That obviously doesn't mean that they
Otherwise.
right. It doesn't mean that, but like I'm the same way. I played it. I'm in my office in the basement, and whenever I hear the stairs, like I'm sitting there with my headphones on, one off, because I don't want to deal with the awkward conversation. If my wife walks in and it's, what on earth are you playing? Like I don't want to deal with that. But at the same time, I like that in a game like this because it tells me what this game is. And so like
Yeah.
seeing what this game looked like, I already knew it was going to be a 100-mile-an-hour button mashing, just chaos.
Yep.
Uh, like just the same way that Nier was. And Nier,
Yep.
I liked every bit as much as I like this game. So
Yeah.
it's not that I like it for that, but I like it because it means like that it is that game. Like any
It's
other game out there that looks like that, I already know this is probably this kind of a game where it's like sci-fi futuristic. It's gonna be real fast and chaotic, and I can roll with that. So I don't mind it
yeah.
because it tells me what the game is, and I like that kind of game. Um, the other with the skill tree. So this is another game I'm playing on PS5. So naturally, I plan to platinum it.
Mhm.
A skill tree is a thing that normally stresses me out because I don't like having to make sacrifices as I go without knowing what I'm going to miss out. So, a skill
Right.
tree, whenever I know that I've got to get all of these things anyways as part of the platinum, no longer stressful. I know I'm going to get all of them. I don't get to a point where that was your last one. I hope you like it because now you've got six other skills that you're not going to be able to get instead. So knowing that I
Right.
can actually unlock all of them, it takes my dislike of that away for sure.
Yeah, I
And
get that.
regardless, you probably noticed the same. It's not a hard game. However you want that skill tree to look, you're gonna be able to beat it. So that's nice to
Sure.
me.
I mean, you can pretty much. I was pretty close to having it filled by the end. I'm sure you could probably do something to make that happen.
Hmm.
All right, for the sake of speed, because I do think we don't necessarily want this to be 6 hours long. I will do my next two. I don't really have to talk about either of them for too long, mostly because I think I'll be able to pave the way on at least one of them for you too. But my number 7 game is a game I know you don't know a ton about and probably will never play, and I would never recommend it to you anyway. But it's a game called Balatro, Balatro. It is a deck building roguelite. Basically, nothing you would enjoy in either of those words. Um, but the idea is it is poker. At the end of the day, you're playing poker, a version of Texas Hold'em where they lay out more than 5 cards or whatever it is, but like they'll lay out the deck and you have like this big hand of cards and you play your best hand and you're trying to win an X amount of turns. Um, but what's interesting about it that I think is just so well done is like then all of a sudden they start adding these jokers to the deck. So between rounds, you then can buy jokers and upgrades for your deck, and those jokers modify what you can do. So it might be one that's like every face card gets a 5-time multiplier because you're trying to hit a certain score. It's like you want to get to 300. It's not about winning versus another person. It's like playing hands that are worth amounts of money based on, excuse me, points based on what you lay out. So if its face cards are worth, 5x, instead of a face card being worth 10, it's suddenly worth 50, right? And then you might have things that are like every 10 you play is worth 5x. So suddenly the 10 itself is worth 50. And if you have a 50 multiplier, all of a sudden your numbers start going up. So you're constantly trying to build this deck of jokers and the cards in your hand, and they have their own other specific power ups to create these runs where you could literally say, I want all diamonds to be worth X amount. And there are things that let you burn cards in your hands. So you can try to build a deck where you only have diamonds and you will always have diamond multipliers and stuff like that. So it's essentially like poker where you start juicing up this deck to try to hit these scores. And you can win. You can win. And then the idea is when you win, you unlock other decks of cards. So you have red, blue, whatever. Each deck maybe comes with its own benefit and it's like its own version of a run. So one where red card means you get one extra turn to try to hit your high score. Blue is like you start with X amount of money that lets you buy those upgrades, so on and so forth, until you've beaten every deck in the game. And then I believe there are even secrets beyond that. But that's the other thing I like about it is, yeah, it's a run that takes 30 plus minutes to do. But then doing so unlocks future power ups for your runs at the very least, if not the next deck, until you can win the game with every deck. And then you've beaten Elantra. So I think I've beaten it with like 4 or 5 of the decks, which is hard on its own. You got to get through
Hmm.
like 6 rounds or 8 rounds or whatever it is. Um, but it's just sort of a fun game to start playing that with, and then there it is pure dopamine. Like once you start building it, and all of a sudden it's like, brung, 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 the way they have the scores like
Like
go
a
up. It's got a
pinball
great
machine.
soundtrack, cool art. So
Yeah.
Palatra is great.
No part of that speaks
Uh,
to me.
no, I know it doesn't. It's definitely like I would recommend. I think every game on this list to you except that one. Which leads me to number 6, which again I'm going to go ahead and assume you cannot rebuttal. I'm going to shock you. It's this far down, and it's another game that while I was playing it, I thought it could be the game of the year. It is Astrobot. That game, I don't know how to describe it except it's like pure delight the entire time you play it. And I will probably go as far to say as I think it is the best 3D platformer I've ever played. That's over Mario 64, Mario Galaxy, Mario Odyssey, uh, all games I fully highly respect and love just as much as everyone who might get mad hearing me say that. But like, I feel like Astrobot, PlayStation finally found like its mascot. Like he's just so cute. His sounds are cool. Like it's just so good. And that was to like also create a game that's essentially marketing material for a lot of games I don't necessarily have a ton of affinity for. That's not to say like there aren't characters in it I love, right? Like you've got your Final Fantasy people and your Bloodborne people and your God of War,
Mhm.
like things I do love. But on the whole, PlayStation doesn't have the same level of mascot as a Nintendo would if they made this same game, right? Like which they do. Mario Party, Mario Kart, even Smash Brothers, is all celebration of gaming or its own people. But PlayStation doing this with Astrobot VR and then Astro's Playroom, and then suddenly making a full baked game that just like it, it's so polished. It feels so good. The way the controller, it's like one of the rare times you get to feel how good that PlayStation controller is
Right.
compared to every other controller in terms of its capability. Um, I had fun like every second I was playing that game. I did not ultimately platform it yet because Metaphor came out and I wanted to stop to jump to it.
Mhm.
I think it was Metaphor or it was something. Um, but I plan to go back. I plan to finish it. I did all the challenge levels up to where I was. I'm basically at the point where like I've got to grab like one thing here, one thing there, and then do that very hard final challenge level to get the platinum, and that's what I plan to do. So that's Astrobot.
Very good.
You're up, dude.
All right. So number 3 for me is the Plucky Squire, which
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
I was
Tell me about this guy.
encouraged
Like,
to
just
add
how
that.
does it work? Yeah, how does the game work? Like, what is the gameplay like loop?
So I'm torn here to describe it versus just share it. But so you're a character in a book or an illustrated book,
Yep.
and you're running around flat, flipping through the pages. You kill the bad guys on the page you're on. You exit top of the book, right of the book, flip to the next page.
Okay.
Um, it's
That'd
fun.
almost be like the equivalent of like old Zelda, like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
square of the map. You kill it, and
yeah.
you go to the next one. It like, moves to the next thing
Yeah,
to do.
even so far as like there's a little bush, chop it down with your sword,
Okay, yeah,
get something out of it. Um, where it gets different, I mean, it's also written very fun. You can tell they're having fun with the language. It's like
yeah,
it's making light of itself almost as it goes. But you get to a
yeah.
point where you can actually exit the book, and now you are on the desk of the kid who the book belongs to. um, I think even is the one writing the book. And you can run around on his desk. And so there's kind of, I don't know if I would call them puzzles, but there's definitely things that you have to get. Like you might have to go acquire something from the desk that you need in order to progress inside of the book. Or it might be that you, like at one point, you actually get expelled from the book. And so you have to go navigate to get a tool that lets you jump back into it. So I like it because it's different. I mean, it's very different. I feel like maybe I played a game on Sega. I have no idea what it would have been called, but was kind of similar in an art style at least. Um, but for everything that I like about it, um, it's too easy. I mean, I'm not the only one. I
I've
read
heard that.
somewhere the hand holding just goes too far, like to the point of you can't actually play the game because you got somebody stopping to tell you a hint or somebody else talking to you about something that doesn't really matter. So there might be a way to get that out of there. Um, but I mean, it's good, innocent fun, and the unique art style and storytelling is it's the reason it's up there for sure. I would recommend you play it. Again, like
I
if
think
you're
I
in the
will.
middle of something more intense, it's a nice little break. Um, it's just you get frustrated with how slow it goes, which is tough.
I'll have to check it out. Now, I was gonna ask because I was gonna tell you Joe showed up in chat, and I was gonna ask him if he's ever played it, but also tell you he tells us that we change brands more than we change underwear.
So long as the brand matches, that's the only thing that
That's
matters.
right.
T to B,
Um,
same brand.
yeah. Okay. So my next one, I don't even know if he's still there. I hope he is though. It's nice to have Joseph back. My next one we've talked about a little bit. Came up on your last list. Now's my time to tell you about it. It's Metaphor. It's number 5. Again, I was convinced this was my goatee at some point. I haven't finished it. That very well could change. Finishing Persona obviously changed the way I felt about it. Um, I would just say, I mean, it is a Persona game, but the setting is much more my speed. Now that said, like I loved the Persona setting. It worked for me. I thought it was really cool to be like in a Japanese high school in Tokyo and like thought that was cool. But this full like medieval like their version of like a Final Fantasy game or something is awesome. I think like it has such a cool set of characters. One of which is quite sincerely maybe my favorite, like if not RPG, at least JRPG character of all time. I don't even want to tell anything about you to spoil him, but like it's like an adult character that's written so well, and there's kind of a surprise twist of how he ends up with your party, and um, it's another one of those things where like the way the story unfolds is awesome. The combat is awesome. It's a mix of like life sim where you want to go around and do these things, but you're doing them because it's fun, not because it's like a chore. You're like, I want to get better at fighting, and to do that, I have this conversation with this person I think is interesting. I think it's cool to go spend my calendar day in the game by doing. That's how it works. Like you have an amount of time to go do something, and you can do, let's say, 2 things a day. Um, it's really cool to see how you decide to spend your time, but that's also upgrading your character while you do those things before you go into a dungeon on day X. That's kind of the way it unfolds. And then the combat is like a very old school, almost like a Final Fantasy game where it's turn based, but the way weaknesses work against each other, the way the classes are called archetypes, and the way those work, and the way you can unlock those and then take skills from those to apply to new people. You can create these like customized characters with like all the talents you would need against all these various weaknesses of enemies. Um, so the way unlocking that works is great. And I just think they basically took Persona 5 and improved on it on like every way imaginable while putting it in a setting that I like more in.
Mm.
That's why it's pretty easy to say like Metaphor is my like number 5 game, but definitely in contention to eventually rise up into like an all-time list.
Did
Knowing where
you
Persona sits.
did you avoid the that podcast I was talking about on purpose, or have you listened to it?
So I've listened to the non-spoiler cast one, but if they have a spoiler cast and that's one you're talking about, I've not listened to a
I
spoiler.
think that is it. I
But I
won't
have listened
even.
to an episode, like the episode where they review it.
Yeah. Okay. I want to say there's a part, but I don't even want to say that much to kind of change like your anticipation for a certain thing.
Yeah, don't spoil it for me. Although I will
But
say, if this is what you heard, the one thing I do know is there's a hint even at the beginning of the game where you have to tell them your name and then you tell them your character's name, and they separate you from the character and give you an understanding that part of what the game is going to analyze is like how can a work of fiction impact you in real life, and they let you know that's what's coming.
mhm,
And I haven't fully gotten to how they're going to unload that on me yet, but I'm excited at the idea of that, and knowing
yeah,
that people have liked it. I'm pretty like I'm pretty anxious to see like, or I shouldn't say anxious, but at least I'm pretty excited to see how they handle that.
yeah. You'll have to let me know
So
once you do. That's a good thing. I feel like there's a lot of things that you watch or that you play or whatever that affects the way that you kind of think through a thing. And at the same time, you're kind of made aware that not everybody thinks things like this. Like, not everybody is necessarily as aware or is willing to consider. And so I like that that is part of this game for
yeah, me
sure.
too. I think it'll be cool to see. I don't know necessarily like when it will come in, and I think it's cool that they kind of let you know, but not why, rather than not telling you at all that it was coming, because you're kind of thinking about it from that lens at the beginning, even if there's not direct impact yet to how they're believing they're
Hmm.
sort of talking to you about that. But we'll see. So I have 4 left, and how many would you have left then? 2 or 3? I
I
can't
have
see.
two. Let me
Okay,
do
so I
two.
should probably do
You do
one more.
four,
Yeah.
three. I do one, and then you can do two, one.
Okay, we can do it like that. Yeah, yeah,
Because if we don't, you're going to have said everything that I've played.
yeah. That's fair. Okay, go.
For me, two is Stellar Blade.
Oh, so I mean, I know your one. I know your next 2 games. You can fill them in, unless you
Yeah.
want to keep the anticipation.
Uh, we can just go ahead and do it. I'll just run through them both. Um,
I like, or at least I find it interesting. We had them in the same order. We both ultimately had Astrobot above Stellar Blade, even though we both love both.
yeah. So I think Stellar Blade is more fun to play. I think it has a story. It draws you in. It's got like more like
Excuse
moving
me,
music.
Astrobot needs to fix
Yeah,
his
yeah,
PS5.
it's got a story. You know what I mean. And it's got music that kind of like builds. I mean, all the good things that you said. It's a beautiful game. It's tight. It's it's just fun. It's controlled chaos in a way that you get to win every single time.
Yeah,
Um, it's just it's awesome. The reason that it's two and not one is not at any fault of the games. It's because of what Astrobot kind of does outside of the game, which I think you also touched on. Like Astrobot the game looks great, so fun. That being my first game coming into the PlayStation after not having
Oh, the
played
perfect. Yeah.
well the 5 at all. So the whole like the new controller, everything that it could do, it
Yeah.
was just it was a lot of fun.
Yep.
It was cutesy. It was fun seeing all the characters brought back, albeit at times a little repetitive.
Yeah.
Probably more so my fault because I was trying to play it quickly. I decided early that I wanted to platinum it, and so it almost became I got to get everything instead of I'm just going to play this game at the pace that it kind of puts me in.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, more so than any of that, even still, is like just what it is. Like it's Mario for PlayStation. It fills the gap that
Yeah.
I would have otherwise said, like Crash Bandicoot is their mascot, but he hasn't done
Hmm.
anything in a long time.
Yeah. You know, I just found out the other day. Apparently, that's a Naughty Dog game.
Crash?
Yeah. Or am
Yeah,
I mixing that up with
no,
someone?
no,
Fresh.
is
No, I think they're Jack and Daxter.
no Naughty Dog's Crash.
Oh yeah, Naughty Dog. That's crazy. I mean, to
Yeah,
think they've been there from the beginning.
yeah. Well, that's why that
The same people who
reveal
make The
was
Last of
very
Us make Crash Bandicoot.
yeah. It's and then that new game that they revealed at the award show,
That looks cool. And that also means though they made Jack and Daxter and Uncharted. That's like a
Uncharted.
fun version of The
That
Last
is
of
an
Us, you know?
entire series that I missed. Count that in the wish I would have played. Um,
Yeah, same,
but I'm
same.
not going to go backwards that far to do it. I need them to do a new
No,
one.
I went back to one, and it feels a little too dated. But then I feel like if I can't play one, I don't want to play the other. So it's tough.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I will say lastly about Astrobot, that is the kind of game. The timing just didn't work out, but I wanted that to be the kind of game that I would play with the kid.
Yeah.
Um,
Astrobot 2,
it's
baby.
yeah. It's not going to work out this one. There's no way she would be able to comprehend the controller. I saw a
Yeah.
video of somebody who gave their kid an unplugged-in controller, and they
Yeah.
played next to him, and I thought that was really cute, and she'd probably get a kick out of that. But
Jack also actually, I don't know if Piper felt like this, but liked watching, um, like watching it. So that was a game that I could literally play while he was around because he would want to sit down and watch me play it. And then he started to connect the dots because they don't understand at this age,
mhm,
like that I was in control because I could be like, oh, do you want me to go do this thing, and I could do what we talked about, which was kind of fun. But
yeah,
cool, man. Well, I my games get wild from here on out. Like we're going all over the place now. So
okay,
this one I'm going to want you to share, if not just for your own purposes. You can see the art style of the game I'm about to tell you about. I'm not going to give a lot of details because I didn't get them, and it made it that much more of an experience. It's the game I finished today, and it jumped all the way to number 4 on my list. It is called Mouthwashing, all one word. Um, and the reason you'll see immediately when you see it why I want you to pull up the trailer and so you at least have an idea of what I'm talking about with the art style as I talk about this. But essentially, it's a kind of story-based walking sim type game. Think about like a Gone Home or a Firewatch as far as like how much action is necessary to do. You're walking around, you're interacting with things to do things. But as a PlayStation 1 level of graphics, and it is probably the most disturbing game I've ever played. So it's this weird mix of like pretty realistic story about this group stuck on a spaceship that has like an incident and issue happen, and they're trying to figure out like what they need to do to get home. That starts teetering on the brink of like psychosis and other stuff that happens, and everything from the story being utterly fascinating to the way they do weird moments to the way they handle sort of the stuff that's happening only in your brain because of the things that are happening on the ship or in your mind. um, it's just so well done by a very small team with incredible art style that, yeah, it looks wild and old, but it works so well in the story and adds to kind of the disturbing things, very adult, kind of grown up things that happen and what it's talking to you about, what it means to work somewhere and try to climb a corporate ladder and what you mean to a company, all the way down to the interpersonal dramas of it. And I think it took like 2.5 total hours to play. Like, I would recommend it to like anyone interested in like a short story game like that. But I had no idea what was coming. And again, from even though I've said a lot about it, I've also said nothing about it because it's
Hmm.
like it's just one of those things to experience it. Same thing we talked about before. Like I think it could be a show and a pretty interesting show or movie. I guess it would be a show; it's too short, but a movie. But you'd lose something in translation, let alone from the graphical style of it to the things that like need to be done in a game sense to interact with things that I think make it have more impact than it would in any other medium storytelling. So it's a cool, wild, disturbing game that like I think I'll be thinking about for way after I play it.
What's the deal with the name?
Uh, I can't even answer that question without spoilers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're not big, but I think there's enough impact, like in the game, like oh,
All right.
but
I mean,
it's not purposeless. I'll say that.
okay. It looks like frantic enough that I could see where this game would be stressful to play.
It it's not. It's not though. I would say like it has moments, but like for the most part, it like the pace is somewhat mellow for most of it. There are things that are stressful, but the content is definitely more so disturbing though. Like it's not a light play. Like it's not gonna be a relaxing game. So,
Okay.
wait, am I supposed to do 4-3? Right?
I'm done.
Oh,
So
you're
you
done.
go 3, 2,
I'm just
1.
going. Well, number three, I'll be really quick. Obviously, if this were an original title, and it might as well be for how big it is, I would have it higher on my list if it was like standalone. And honestly, it's like kind of unnecessarily docked because of the fact it's not. Number three for me is Elden Ring: Shadow of the Earth. Uh, I know there's all this debate about should a DLC be a game, but like, let's be honest, it's longer than all the Souls games. Just the DLC, it's 60 hours
I
to
didn't
play it.
realize that.
Yeah, it's like it is a full game. It is essentially a sequel. You have to be almost at the end of Elden Ring 1 before you can access this area of the DLC with some exception, I think. It's more Elden Ring. They didn't really fix anything that I think I would call a problem. They did come up with I think a an upgrade system that's interesting that makes sure you can't just like level up too far and make the DLC not fun. There are like items that essentially enable percentages of your total skills to be activated, and so like you have to have explored the map to essentially power up for the areas and get a cool new concept for them, which works in some ways, doesn't in others. But I'm glad they were trying to experiment. Awesome bosses, more of the harder bosses, just like you'd expect, and some of like the most stunning, like jaw dropping areas they've made, which says a lot for them because they've had a lot of those. Just thinking like Anor Londo and Irithyll Valley and all the things they've done across all their games, but it's more Elden Ring, which is always going to be good for me. And
Well,
if it
we'll
was Elden
probably,
Ring 2, it'd probably be number one. It's just something about being a DLC. You want to let like other games pass it. You know what I mean?
yeah. I was curious how you'd feel about that because I know like Silent Hill kind of got that treatment with it being a remake.
Yeah.
I'm sure Resident Evil 4 got all the accolades, but would have had to have dealt with the same. It's a remake, so I'm not disappointed to see it on your list for sure.
I think what's interesting about you saying that it has made me give it thought about why that happened or why I did that personally. And I think the answer for me at least would be that um I think I would want to give game of the year personally to a game that like was a new concept in and of itself, you know what I mean? Like rather than like something is going to be docked for points to say like, oh, you extended something you had already made. Like your time for accolades for this game. So obviously a sequel or a DLC is going to have some of that, but also a remake. Like you're building on the full backbone of something that already existed. So you didn't do it new this time on your own.
Hmm.
The flip side of that is like I never played Silent Hill 2 ever. It was a brand new game to me, and I think I would have made it GOTY if I loved it to that level because to me it was all new. Whereas actually, I think if I'd played 2 before, then played the remake, I don't know if I'd necessarily have it as high, but I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe I would because I've had Resident Evil high on my list before.
Okay.
Number 3 for me.
Two.
This is gonna be a fun one to talk
Two.
about. There's
Right?
not a ton to say except I've recommended you, but oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
Oh, no, 2. I'm sorry, I'm at 2.
Okay.
This one was in my GOTY spot for most of the time since I played it, and then just got knocked. But number 2 is Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. That is the one where you play as Zelda, and rather than your basic combat mechanic, it's like her ability to make echoes of items she finds, which are essentially copies. So you can do that with a table or a bed or a tree or a pot or whatever, or you can do it with enemies. And so ultimately, what it kind of becomes is almost like catching Pokemon because you can find enemies in the wild, kill them, steal their echoes, and then launch them out to fight other enemies in the areas you're in. You're solving puzzles. How do you navigate things with certain items by creating these echoes? Add this top-down view, similar to what they did when they did the remake of Link's Awakening, that almost like toy isometric look.
Hmm.
But what was so cool about it for me that I think really made it click into this position is I realized it's the first time I've loved a Zelda that was closer to the original, like in terms of the way it looked, being like almost like a 2D top down game.
Right.
Like all the Zeldas I've loved in my life have been like your Ocarina of
Yeah, it's
Times,
not like
your
a
Breath of the
descendant of
Wild.
that. Yeah.
And it was so cool to see like when I suddenly stumbled upon and was like in Hyrule Castle, and then I found Kokoriko Village and all the things I'd seen in these other ways, and they had the feel, but like in that art style, it was suddenly like, you know, scratching that itch of like, oh, this is like they made Zelda, and it feels like Zelda. It has dungeons. Like I know I'm not Link, but that didn't matter at all. You never think about it, like it does. It makes no difference. And because it's the world. Like not to say Link isn't important, but it's like the world of Zelda, which makes it fun. All the NPCs, all the enemies, all the Ganons, all the whatevers. But like Link doesn't even talk. You only
That's what I
have
was
so
about to
much.
ask. Does Zelda speak?
Uh, I don't remember. I mean, you're picking options. So I don't remember if she actually replies to people or not. I want to say probably, but there is a pretty interesting story. It's not crazy. I mean, it's what you'd expect. Monsters causing some kind of like corruption, and
Kind of
you're going
blight.
into dungeons. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you're going into dungeons to undo said blight to find the final boss to do it. That final boss is not Ganon, which is fun. It's like a new thing. Um, so I loved Echoes of Wisdom. And if you're doing your math, that means my game of the year is
Wait.
Black Myth.
Oh, okay. Keep going.
There it is. Well, you're gonna guess. You didn't know. You didn't notice it was missing.
No, no, no. I wasn't gonna guess. I was gonna ask you a Zelda question.
Oh, good. Do it. Yeah, I'll go to Black Myth in a minute.
So I get a Switch too. I've got Tears of the Kingdom on my mind.
Mhm.
Do you say play Tears of the Kingdom or do you say play Zelda Echoes of Wisdom first?
Well, that's the thing. It's like hard to say. I mean, I would say play Tears of the Kingdom because Tears of the Kingdom is better than Breath of the Wild. It's my favorite Zelda game, and it's a probably top 10 game of all time. There'd be no reason to go back to Breath of the Wild from Tears of the Kingdom once you play it because all it is less. It's like less game. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like worse abilities, less map, less whatever. Like I would say Tears of the Kingdom.
Okay.
Zelda, Echoes of Wisdom, I would say like which are you in the mood for? Do you want cute, shorter, old school like what you liked about Ocarina, or do you want longer, fun, more robust what you liked about Breath of the Wild? Assuming you did, like that's how different they would be. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Um, it just tickled more of what the era that I liked about Zelda. Like which was Ocarina, like felt more childlike. Like the dialogue was a little cuter. Whereas like Breath of the Wild, not like over the top, of course, but like felt like a little bit more of a mature Zelda game.
Yeah, when you play
Less,
as many Soulsborns types, it's nice to play
yeah,
an innocent game every now and then.
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Black Myth.
Speaking of, yeah, speaking of Soulsborns that are dark, Black Myth Wukong. I told you when I switched from Stellar Blade to it, I think it's part of why Stellar Blade I allowed it to fall so far now because they're so similar. And I still ultimately would probably say I liked Stellar Blade's combat more, but the marriage of everything in Black Myth was so good. And um I think the most important thing to talk about here is a really odd thing to bring up in a Game of the Year episode, but like this would not have been my game of the year if I played it when it first came out, and that was my true first attempt at it. The fact I waited made it game of the year, and what I mean by that is, I did try it actually originally. I got to the final boss, or not even actually mid boss. There are 6 chapters in the game. I got to the midway boss of chapter 1. I mean, that's how short, maybe 3 hours of playing that game, and the boss kicked my shit in, and it's whatever. That's gonna happen in those games, but Um, it was just because the combat hadn't clicked in a certain way, and I wasn't willing to try to figure it out. And kind of in my mind, I'm like, too old for these Souls likes. I don't enjoy it to this degree. Now I'm done. And I don't remember if it was just I wanted more Stellar Blade was part of why I looked into it. But the other thing I didn't love about it is I couldn't find my way around in Black Myth. Um, a lot of the areas kind of look the same and fold on top of each other, and I was getting turned around. Well, when I looked at like what am I going to play after Stellar Blade, and I thought about Black Myth and it being like on the Game of the Year awards list, um, for the Game Awards list for Game of the Year. was like, I should go back and look at that game. Like it's a Souls like that's up for game of the year. Like, why wouldn't I play it? And speaking of a developer loving their game so much, like you talked about earlier, they listened to everyone's feedback about that and made a super awesome map in the game that changed entirely how you play the game to figure out like where you need to go next. And to the point where like now looking back, I'm like, I don't know how anyone played this without a map. Like it would have been so hard to figure out without guides or videos what to do. Like the map was a game changer. The ability to just quickly teleport to where I wanted to go from that map. They had a way to teleport at your bonfires essentially before, but adding the map changed that game for me. So the combat, the map, the story, the look. I mean, like the graphics are stunning. Um, I think it's just it took like what the unseriousness of Stellar Blade, and I wouldn't say Black Myth Wukong is by any means like mega serious, but it's like a take on I guess sort of like an epic called Journey to the West. They saw kind of have some fun with the stories and stuff and the way they do their cutscenes, and so it's not too weighty, but it just felt like a more locked in serious version of everything I liked about Stellar Blade, which is I think why Stellar Blade I allowed to fall down and it climbed to the top. Um, it was just rather than the um, kind of parry based stuff with Stellar Blade, like I told you, Wukong is more about like dodging, and then also you kind of get these this arsenal of spells you can choose from, which also it has an upgrade tree. I know I said I didn't like that in Stellar Blade. I don't love it here either. Um, but what I think made it more forgiving is that they want you to respec all the time. So you have you're level 90. That means you have 90
That
points.
sounds
But
tough.
it, but what's interesting is you don't have to respec from scratch. You have specs that are in your like your weapon, you have specs in your skills, you have specs in like your survivability, and you can just empty one tree and redo it if you want, rather than doing all 90. Um, so I think the ability to do that was what I liked more about this tree, but also using the spells. So like you can freeze a boss and hit them until they essentially crack like ice. You can then like disappear and step away while you heal. And you can think about like what am I struggling in a boss fight and like change the skills you use because you might be like, my problem is I can beat this boss but I never have time to heal. Well, you put on Cloud Step, you go invisible, and that means you can take a breather to like chug your drink, and that solves your problem for that fight. For another fight, you might be like, I need damage. Okay, well instead I'm gonna make that spell something that like powers up my damage or turns me into a spirit where like I smash my head into this person or I turn into a tiger that kills them or whatever it is. Um, I just found myself like experimenting with like so many different things and so many different fights that like I loved it. My only complaint about it, and anyone I think who would play it would be honest with you about this, like the sixth chapter. So every chapter is pretty even, like pretty same length, same quality, same whatever. Sixth chapter feels like they suddenly give you a mechanic you hadn't had in the whole game, and it feels like they dropped like they took a box and shook out like 10 bosses they had extra and spread them across a map that is suddenly giant compared to what the rest of the game was. The mechanic I'm not going to talk too much about, but solves for the space issue. But like it's just like bosses spread across the space, and you got to find the correct four of them, put together an armor set to get to the end of the game. It felt so random and so bad out of nowhere compared to the rest of the game that it almost hurt it. I was
Mhm.
like, I'd be lying about how good I felt about the other five chapters if I left this one. So I've gone on for forever about Black Myth, but that's my goatee.
Well, I have a question about it.
Yep.
The skill tree, just because this you said is a Soulsborne game, does the skill tree in this instance kind of solve for choosing like your build type? Because I feel like something that I'm
Yeah.
starting to get stuck in to where I'm not even allowing myself to just play those games. I'm searching on the internet what is the best build and what's the build guide? How should I min max
Yep.
everything along the way? Does this kind of sidestep that issue?
I'd say yes and no. I'd say yes because obviously like you can sort of like make a quote unquote build that you need on the fly by just like hitting some buttons to turn on like a certain part of your skill tree or like activating a certain spirit for a boss fight, and that's it. But I'd say the reason I say yes and no is that my answer would be no because really what that means is you're ultimately doing like tiny builds all the time, which you might like less, right? Like
Yeah.
I, but it's definitely not as dramatic as I'm making it sound. It's like you're constantly having to respec. Like I picked a build and I used it for 95% of the game, but there are maybe three bosses where I was like, my build won't work because immobilized. The one I mentioned that freezes someone, for example, this boss will counter me with it, or it's immune to it. And so why would I keep the core skill of my thing? So I would just clear that skill tree out just for that fight, and instead activate like a different ability that did something else for me beneficial for that fight. But then you can quickly go back and again clear just a tree of like maybe 10 skills and put them all back in the other one. So it's not like the respecking takes forever because you're trying to put all 90 points back. It's like six and you know which ones you want because you power up as far as you can. Like the skill trees for each thing, if this makes sense, are linear. So I need survivability. It's not like that's like a giant sphere and I got to pick
Yeah, it
which things I
just
want.
takes.
If I go back to survivability, I'll just go down and get as much of it as I can with the spare points I have. So I'd say yes, it solves that issue because you don't feel as locked in, and you don't need like a larval tier that's like a
Hmm.
limited thing, so you're afraid to experiment with it.
Oh
Like
yeah,
there are times where I would just tinker like one thing on and one thing off because all you can do, you can also just go over a specific node and hit square, and they give you essentially the level back, but put it into something else. That's how quick you can do it. The only limitation is you have to be at a bonfire, so you can't be mid boss fight, pause, and do it.
that makes sense. That's fair. You
Yeah,
didn't
I'm saying
mention.
bonfire, they're shrines, but just for
Yeah,
the purposes of you knowing what I'm talking about.
you didn't mention in your pros column that you're a monkey, which is awesome and
That is
is
an
never the
obvious pro.
case. Yeah.
No, that's an obvious. No, that's an obvious
Um,
pro. The combat's also like lightning fast. So you talk about the button mashy, like it's the fastest combat I've ever seen. Like your combos, you're hitting it's square triangle. Essentially, you're hitting square to do one of those like staff thing, like like almost like a boxer with a speed bag, and you're doing such small chinks of damage. But obviously, like 50 of those equal like what you'd expect out of a big hit.
yeah.
But it has this interesting system where the number of times you hit an enemy builds focus, which is say you have three like focus dots, you can see those. Those are your heavies, and then you unload those for like big chunks off the enemy. But the balance there is that if the enemy hits you while you're doing a heavy attack, and you can charge it, right? So you can hit triangle once and hit them with one of your three dots worth of power, or you can hold it down and hit them with all of it. And that'll take like a good 2 inches off their health bar. But the balance is if an enemy hits you while you're doing the heavy, you don't do the damage and you lose the points. So if you do a charged heavy and get hit while doing it, you don't damage them and you lost all the like light hits worth of focus you've built up. So it's a cool balance of that mechanic of like get in your hits, back out so you can get like safely charge it and then jump in and like wham them.
Hmm.
It's a cool balance. Like, do you want to be quick? Do you want to do your heavies? Do you want to use spells? You're constantly juggling like three options for damage that I think rather than feeling cumbersome, it's actually feels like you constantly have something to go at them with. So it's actually more fun because I'm like, I'm out of focus. Okay, well it's cool. I'll do my like light combo, and that does a big chunk. By the time that's done, I've built in my spell back, and I hit him with like a fire blast or something. And then by the time that's done, I've got my ability to go back around and hit you with a heavy again. So you're just kind of constantly doing this dance of making sure everything's charged so that you can always do big damage.
Sounds like though, I mean, as chaotic as it might be, there's still order to it because of how you handle those risks, and like you can't just go crazy because then,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
It still is like a Souls like. I think a lot of people are saying it's not, but it is. Because you're it's like deliberate. You got to take your time, wait for your openings and punish and be patient. I think the flip side though is like you have more in your tool belt than you do in a Souls game, which is ultimately at the end of the day, aside from maybe a spell, it's R1 and R2 and a dodge is like what you're really always kind of balancing. Whereas this one is like you have your light, you have your heavy, you have four spells, and then you have two things you can like spirits you can turn into. But I'm also not a person who likes like what I like about Souls is the simplicity of it only being kind of those three core buttons. But this still didn't feel like cumbersome to the point where I was like, oh shit, I forgot I had that button. Like
yeah.
you just remember because the UI is intuitive enough, and when you get something back, it kind of makes a sound like a shing sound in your controller and flashes yellow like on the screen with like a blink and then stays yellow. So there's like always a visual cue that your eyes just eventually learn. Like you're never actually looking down. You see the yellow in the corner of your eye. You hear the sound. You're like, oh, I have my ability to launch the immobilize again. Oh, my focus points. I heard them pop up. I'm ready to hit it again. It just becomes fluid. So even though it sounds like a lot to juggle, it actually doesn't feel like that. It feels more like you're never just stuck there without an option of like something.
How much in any game that's ever had a thing that you build up to and then it kind of functions as like a super? How often do you ever like strategically use that versus you see the yellow, you hear the shing, and you just instantly jam the buttons. It's go time.
Oh, that's it. I mean, although in this one you definitely can't instantly jam it because the things they do are so different. So like while like I said, while one of your things will freeze someone and one of them will um, make you invisible. One of them lets you like pull out clones. Like that's how different they are. So you definitely are like for at least that portion, like checking to see what it is. So it's more deliberate. But you do have the version of a super where it is like if you're at the end of the boss and he's got an inch left and you hear it pop, you're like, bam, like I gotta get it. Like
Mhm.
that still happens for sure. But it's great. So we have
All right.
14 games and we and
Yeah.
we want to narrow them to 5. So I don't want to take forever here because I know we've been at this for almost 3 hours. But I think what we could do here is try to discuss what we think our order should be. I have a I have a gut about what I think number 1 should be, but I'm interested to hear if you were just asked ice cold. And the reason I want to go at this order because normally we'd obviously start at 10, but
Hmm.
we only have 5, and we're only going to start at 5 because our lists are different enough. I kind of feel like every game we have in common should probably be, and I have a thought about what number 1 should be, but I want to know what you think about that.
I think I, I I would say number one is Astrobot. And again,
I think
it's
so too.
it's not for everything the game is. It's beyond that. It's what it means to PlayStation.
Yep. I'm with
It's
you on that. And it's the only one that appears on both of our lists as high as it does. Like it's 6 on mine and 1 on yours. That's like if we were to add the points together, that'd be like the lowest total. So I think it should definitely be.
Let me guess at what I think two is, and you tell me. Like two, three, let me take a few swings. Or if you feel comfortable, let's say number four. Does like a Stellar Blade feel in number four for you?
I like that.
Four or
If not
five.
even,
4 or 5.
I was gonna say 3 or 4. So I like 4 then
Okay.
because like, it's the next highest commonly rated game.
Well, and so this is where I'm kind of thinking like weight yours a little bit heavier than mine. Like the reasons that I like that game, the reason that you like that game makes it an awesome game on any given year, but doesn't necessarily make it the best game of that year. It might be the most
Yeah.
fun, but it doesn't make it the best necessarily. So I think like based on everything I've heard, your own 2 and 3 to me has to be Black Myth and Metaphor. Now the
I like
ordering of
that.
those, I would I would give you Black Myth at 2.
This is interesting. I wasn't expecting you to say metaphor, but I'm okay with that.
It's just another one. Like I understand what it is. Like
Yeah.
I won't play it because of how long it is,
Yep.
but I understand how good it is, how unique it is, and how like impactful it is even after the fact.
I like it. I think that's like a surprise jump that I like. I think then I do think I know what. So I think I'm fully on board with Black Myth at 2 because like that's also one that like we know each other's genres. You already have been considering it. You know where it falls, whether you love it or not. It's not like you picked Stellar Blade above it because you haven't played it. And I think it's safe to know you'd probably at least like Black Myth. That's my number. I'm good with 3 as metaphor. The one I was gonna pitch, and I think maybe now is where we decide. Almost every sentence you said about metaphor because you're like because of what it is and you know what I like and what we have in common, what I've heard about it. The very same thing though could be said about I think Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. And so I thought that's actually
Dude,
what you're going to say at 3 because it was higher on mine, and I still think you would like Zelda. So I wonder. I at least think it should be 5, but I'm curious if you think
I'm
you could see those
I'm
swapping.
fine with making it a 5. I think the reason that I didn't mention it for either, I would have never thought to put it at 2 or 3. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that at my level of plugged in, which is admittedly only so much, it's not
Yeah,
nothing, but it's not, I haven't played 60 games, whatever you've rattled off here. That has been on my radar precisely 0. Like the fact that
also,
it's,
it wasn't on anyone's GOTY list.
yeah,
Like,
like the
I
fact
don't
that it's
know.
quietly done what it's done
Yeah.
is something. I don't
So
know
I'm gonna say
why.
Zelda Echoes. I'm curious, like, what are its Metacritic scores? Because to your point, like, it didn't get incredible, like feedback or showing on lists. But I'm looking, it's a 9 out of 10 from IGN. It's an 85 on Metacritic. Like,
I mean, 9 out
I
of
think
10.
Nintendo had such a quiet year that
Yeah.
Zelda suffered as a result. And I also think the Zelda franchise has done something interesting where like it's kind of fractured itself into like what feels like mainline now, like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and the remakes. So like the Link's Awakening and now this, like they got their chibi one, like the art style being different. But I think that's what surprised me is like because Link's Awakening was a remake of a Game Boy game, it felt emptier. So like the look, it felt like a coat of paint on an old game, where this feels like they took that look and they made it into a full modern game that has some of the charm of an old game, but it felt so produced and highly polished that I think it deserves uh, a lot of the love I'm giving it and more. Like I wish more people had it on their GOTY list. Like I haven't seen it on. I do as I told you, like this is where I find a lot of channels, but I just go look for GOTY, and it's great background noise when you're doing something. I don't think I've heard it come up on anything. It wasn't at Game Awards. It's not been on anyone's list. So I'm happy to give it the love, and I think 5 is fair. I think next year it'll be fun to. I think it'll be fun every year. We should look at the previous year's things because I imagine we'll fill some gaps. It'll also be fun to look back and be like, how do we feel about that? You know, and like how we feel about it now.
I just added another line here for honorable mention because a lot of the stuff that you included was for kind of like one-off unique things about it. So like
Uh,
of the others that you included on your list, who are you going to include in an official top 5, so to speak, for doing their thing?
Well, I think it's fair to say like we wouldn't. I think there's something to be said that we both had Mamadora at the back of our lists. So like I think it's not on. Like I think that it means something that it didn't beat something else.
Mm-hmm.
I still loved it. I told you the games that actually did beat for me, but still. Uh honorable mention, dude. Like
I don't even
the
think it
fact
has
is
to be off of this list. I think you've had such variety with what you've had on all of these. Maybe
well,
it's not honorable mention top 5. Maybe it's just they they laid out their thing, they went all in, and they live and die by it. They lived.
if you want me to be the representative of that, it's mouthwashing. That's the most like surprised and taken I've been by anything.
Okay.
Like that's the most I've been like, I did not know what to expect. Other than the fact, I guess, to be fair, that I heard about it because it was on everyone's Game of the Year list, but no one would say what it was, right?
Yeah.
Like, um, the trailer is much more frantic and disturbing than the game on the whole is, or at least like percentage wise, right? Like, you're not constantly seeing like a bandaged, burnt up man like on a table and a cake and darkness and giant horses and people drinking mouthwash.
Just a
Like,
nightmare.
yeah, like, but it does have that at moments. But that's like a percentage of the game that the trailer wants to capture without giving you spoilers. But at the core of the game is like almost like a little mystery. 4 or 5 interesting characters that have different dynamics that are affecting each other. Cool, sort of like gritty sci-fi story. A little bit of humor, to be honest with you, and you feel the production. Like I can feel the developers' touch on the game in a way that's good, almost like we're having a conversation with them, and I think that's a cool thing. So that's why I would put it there. Just like I almost call it honorable mention, rather is like my like no, just trust me, try it. If anything I've said about it sounds interesting to you at all, go try it. Kind of the game. Like I'd be like, just trust me. It's short. Like it's like watching a movie. It took 2 hours and 20 minutes or something for me to play that whole game. I
That's
loved
so
it.
short.
Or at the very least, go watch like a good like because every streamer did it in a full chunk. You could go watch like Jacksepticeye, one of the biggest streamers on earth. He did the whole playthrough in one go. I went to watch some of my favorite moments, like just watch him play it because it's that kind of game. Like, oh, how do you react to this insane thing that happened? It's fun to watch people do that. So I'd say mouthwashing is my like. Maybe you haven't heard of it, but if what I said about it sounds interesting at all, go check it out. Game.
And
What's the acronym for that?
it's not disturbing or anything enough that even at 2.5 hours you feel like you need to take a quick break. Like it is
No, I mean,
always
so
a
I played it. I played it in 2 or 3 total sittings, just because I don't. We talked about we have jobs and our
yeah.
dads and our marriage. Like, um, but I 5 to 10 years ago, I certainly would have played it in one sitting. Because it's like watching a movie. It's one of those things where it's definitely not disturbing the whole way. Like, it's a slow burn. I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
say there's anything disturbing at all in the first half of it, maybe not half, but at least 30 to 45 minutes. And then you're kind of at that point, it's actually you want to keep going because you're like the mystery keeps presenting more information about it. It kind of does some back and forth through event like and times that are giving you answers to pieces at a time. And it's cool to start piecing them together. But then again, like I said, without spoiling it, the way they deal with the ability and the way they produced it to like tell a story through a game And the fact that like when you turn around and something else can be there when you turn back around, what they can
Mm.
do with the, it sounds crazy to say, but like the pixels and stuff like that, they tell stories with how you move and what you're interacting with, and it kind of goes to like what you said you loved about the idea of Black Myth and developers just love it. You can tell these developers like their personality and thoughts and the way they want to tell a story came out, and they executed it perfectly in a game that kind of like a first. I haven't played anything like it. Like I told you, it's like walking sim, like a Firewatch or a Gone Home, but like those are relatively grounded. They have some weird things that happen in them, but this is like that kind of game, but like utilize the medium to the max, you know.
Yeah.
So
Very cool.
that's Dex Build's top five and a plus one uh, for 2024. I'm excited to see what 2025 looks like, but I think in the meantime, we should mention to everybody uh, we're about to go platinum, baby, with Demon Souls. Andy talked to you about his new addiction, and that's what we plan to do within the week to get that series off the ground and running. So keep watching our Twitch channel. We'll stream it live. We'll put it up on YouTube in individual episodes. Follow along with us. We hope to have one or two out a week. I'd imagine will be our cadence, maybe more. And see if Andy can go platinum. Would that be your first platinum Souls?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so Andy and I are researching the paths. I've got a book about the lore. We hope to make it like I'd say it's fair to say like a pretty comprehensive playthrough. Yes, it's a 15-year-old game, the original. We're playing the remaster, but I still think it'll be fun to kind of revisit. And it's your first time playing it at all. That should be made clear. You've never played. You played a
Right.
second of it, but you never played Demon Souls.
Yeah, I mean, you've got your books too, so I'm expecting not just keep me on the track of platinuming so that we don't have to play
Oh,
it
I'm gonna have it
35
with me.
times.
I'm gonna lick my thumb and go to index and stuff
Yeah,
at
I
times.
mean, I'm expecting lore as we go too because
Yeah,
this stuff doesn't stick very well.
yeah. I just want you to be able to see the book because it looks so cool. I'm gonna hold it like this on stream.
I believe it.
Cool. Well, that's it. We did it exactly 3 hours and 41 seconds. We did a 3 hour Goaty episode as our first stream.
Get started on next year.
Yeah. All right. Till next time. For
Bye.
Dexbuild, dude.